Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the County Council session and numerous public hearings this afternoon. Our first item is item 3 and is a public hearing on zoning text amendment 25-01, self-storage, civic and institutional. It's called the SAVE ZTA, the Street Activation and Vacancy Elimination ZTA. This ZTA would allow self-storage above ground, the ground floor in the CR zone with a charitable, philanthropic institution or cultural institution on the ground floor. A Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee work session is scheduled for March 24th, 2025. Those wishing to submit material for the Council's consideration should do so by the close of business on March 17th, 2025. As a reminder of our public hearing testimony guidelines, your comments must be limited to issues relevant to the public hearing topic for which you are testifying and are appropriate for a public meeting. You will hear a tone when your time is up, and we appreciate everyone abiding by their allotted time. We have one in-person speaker for this item, and we have Mr. John Sweeney.
Good afternoon, council members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is John Sweeney, and I represent Turbinell Real Estate Partners, a national developer with a focus on adaptive reuse projects transforming vacant buildings across the country. We're here today to express our support for the Street Activation and Vacancy Elimination, or SAVE zoning text amendment. When our company looks at converting existing office buildings, we strive to find the highest and best use for that given project. As such, we evaluate a variety of uses, including residential and hospitality. There are certain properties, however, where office to residential or office to hospitality conversions are simply not feasible. When these types of uses are not viable, we have found that a self-storage use provides a meaningful benefit, especially when combined with other public amenities as required by the SAVE zoning text amendment. As such, the approach of the SAVE ZTA aligns with our commitment to revitalize ghost buildings in urban environments, creating a net positive impact to the surrounding neighborhood. We have seen properties both in Montgomery County and other areas of the country where owners have tried many approaches to disposing of these ghost buildings. This has included putting these vacant office buildings up for sale through an auction process at a significantly discounted price, but there are properties that have significant site complexities and market challenges, which make it even an auction property unattractive for sale and redevelopment. It is this subset of buildings that become the ghost building, which are dark, unactivated along the street, and make no contribution to the community. The SAVE zoning text amendment presents a valuable opportunity to revitalize these problem and long vacant buildings. While the ZTA is very restrictive in its scope, it ensures that a property owner will be required to activate the street by bringing in a philanthropic and or cultural institution to the ground floor. A use that would positively impact the community, specifically the SAVE ZTA, is a game changer for nonprofits that we have found need spaces, and the requirement that such institution be located on the ground floor has an added benefit for activating the adjoining and surrounding pedestrian environment. The SAVE ZTA also requires the preservation of the character of an existing office building. As part of any redevelopment, a property owner would be required to maintain the facade and windows, ensuring that the building continues to read as an office building. The SAVE ZTA provides a path forward to eliminate problem and long-term vacant buildings, with the result benefiting the community as a whole. We respectfully ask for your support for the SAVE ZTA and this important initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sweeney. Thank you. That is our only in-person person on that item for the public hearing. This public hearing is now closed. I do want to note that we have colleagues on Zoom also listening in. We have Councilmember Mink and Lukey with us as well. Now we will move on to our next public hearing. This is item number 4, and a public hearing on zoning text amendment 25-02, workforce housing development standards. This ZTA would allow additional residential building types in the R40, R60, R90, and R200 zones along certain corridors with a minimum percentage of workforce housing units. A Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee work session is scheduled for March 31st, 2025. Those wishing to submit material for the Council's consideration should do so by the close of business on March 24th, 2025, and the Council will continue to accept correspondence after this date. As a reminder of our public hearing testimony guidelines, your comments must be limited to issues relevant to the public hearing topic for which you are testifying and are appropriate for a public meeting. You will hear a tone when your time is up, and we appreciate everyone abiding by their allotted time. The first 5 speakers, yes, we have for this is Irene Lane, Debbie Heller, Maury Mechanic, thank you, Artie Harris, and Rohit Khanna. We'll start with Ms. Lane.
Good afternoon, Council President Stewart, Council Vice President Jawando, and County Council members. My name is Irene Lane, and I serve as the mayor of the town of Chevy Chase. We appreciate the county's efforts to expand housing opportunities for essential workers, and we recognize the thoughtful engagement of Council members Friedson and Fanny Gonzalez in gathering community input. While we generally support the goals of this legislation, we believe it can be strengthened through several key amendments and clarifications, as well as responses to our technical questions posed in our written testimony. These adjustments will help ensure balanced growth, infrastructure sustainability, and compatible development standards. Our recommendations are as follows. First, the ZTA is intended to apply only to lots fronting major corridors. To ensure this, we recommend an amendment prohibiting lot chaining to interior lots. We are still evaluating whether restrictions on lateral lot chaining along the corridor may also be necessary and await answers to our technical questions before taking a position. Secondly, we strongly recommend maintaining a maximum FAR of 1.25 across all residential zones rather than increasing it to 1.40 for R60 lots as proposed by the Planning Board. The 1.25 FAR already allows for significant expansion of multifamily housing while mitigating concerns for traffic congestion and green space preservation. With respect to parking pressures, we support the Planning Department's recommendation that on-site parking be tied to the number of bedrooms in a unit, preventing increased strain on street parking. Further, we request confirmation that Section 4.1.8, the compatibility requirements of the county zoning ordinance, be applied to all workforce housing developments, ensuring compatibility with adjacent single-family homes. This includes maintaining a 45-degree angular plane for roof height, ensuring a smooth transition between new and existing structures. Third, to preserve these units for longer-term housing, we strongly urge the County Council to prohibit workforce housing from being used as short-term rentals. These units should remain available to the workers they intend to serve rather than becoming daily or weekly accommodations. Fourth, we commend the Planning Department for recommending a ban on stormwater management waivers, aligning with the 2021 Climate Action Plan. Fifth, we are particularly concerned about the Planning Board's recommendation to eliminate site plan review, which is a key element of public participation and transparency. We urge the Council retain site plan review to ensure the public input remains central to the development process. Finally, we request that the public record remain open until just before the County Council vote, allowing residents to submit feedback as more information becomes available. By incorporating these amendments, clarifying the public engagement process, and addressing our technical questions, we believe this legislation can be more effective, balanced, and transparent while earning broader community support. Thank you for your time and leadership. We look forward to working together to ensure a thoughtful approach to workforce housing.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Next, Ms. Heller.
Hi, I'm Debbie Heller, council member from the town of Somerset. I want to thank you first for the opportunity to give this testimony. Our democratic practices in the county are paramount to who we are. It is this very principle that governs my testimony today. I appreciate that the residents' voices were heard concerning the Attainable Housing Strategy Initiative, and the council has pivoted to the More Housing Now, New Options for Workers legislation before us. I have 3 points to make. My first point, I understand that the impetus behind the changes in zoning is to create housing that is affordable for our workforce of nurses, teachers, firemen, and other workers in our communities that make lower wages. But the initiative of More Housing Now will not be able to meet that goal. What this legislation will provide for is vastly more market rate housing that will be a developer's dream. What they will be able to do is buy houses and tear them down, and instead of creating triplexes or larger, they will build duplexes and therefore avoid having to build any lower income units. I doubt the goal of 15% workforce housing will ever be achieved. I envision our corridors filled with market rate duplexes. Surely there are better ideas to create the type of housing that is needed for our workforce. My second point is parking. This plan does not guarantee parking on the newly built properties. Where will the residents of the newly constructed homes park? Parking is not allowed on any of these thoroughfares. They will have to resort to parking in the neighborhoods on streets that are already narrow and already overcrowded. Any building on the corridors has to have full parking allotments included so as not to burden neighborhoods. My third point is about process, the democratic process, actually. Why wasn't this legislation developed with input from the residents from the county? There should have been input from every county group whom this legislation affects. For many in the county, this zoning will define their own housing. As it appears to me, this was rushed. One week I was at an AHSI town hall, and the very next now was introduced. How could that happen in a week? Why the rush? Why not do it right and bring the residents to the table? What will be lost if you do it right? Maybe time? Please pause the now zoning process and bring a representative from every stakeholder group to the table and start again. Please do this the right way. Please bring us legislation that we can all be proud of and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Mechanic.
Thank you. I'm Maury Mechanic, council member for the Village of North Chevy Chase. The More Housing Now proposal is a significant improvement over the prior Attainable Housing Strategy initiative. Credit to the council for having heard and listened to the concerns that have been raised. While the underlying objectives of More Housing Now are laudable, it remains unclear whether the proposal's implementation will provide for increased opportunities for affordable workforce home ownership or just provide more affordably priced workforce rental units. Further, while there may be parts of the county where the proposal may achieve the desired results, that may not be the case elsewhere. It's difficult to assess the impacts because there is no evaluation of different infrastructure conditions that vary from one part of the county to another. What then is most likely to happen in certain parts of the county is a replacement of residential home ownership by increased residential rental units managed by real estate investment firms, accompanied by a fundamental shift in the dynamics of local municipal governance, away from meeting the needs of individual residential owners to dealing with absentee corporate management companies. A minimal increase in workforce housing accompanied by significant expansion of market price rental units at locations irrespective of demand. Moreover, the full impact of the major disruptions and uncertainty arising from the Trump administration's actions need to be considered in determining whether to pursue major changes in countywide residential housing strategy at this time. These concerns notwithstanding, if the proposal is adopted in some form, it is absolutely essential that there be a final determination of the properties to which it would apply and whether the optional method workforce housing procedures could also be utilized to cover for properties adjacent to or abutting covered properties. Failure to do so will open the door for after-the-fact gamesmanship that could significantly expand the scope of the program. Other concerns that we will address in separately written testimony or separately submitted written testimony include considerations of means for managing increased density without damaging the surrounding single-family neighborhood character, conducting comprehensive environmental and infrastructure impact assessments, development of standards to ensure consistent and equitable availability of workforce residential units, and retention of the site plan approval process. In conclusion, the housing issues facing Montgomery County are serious and complex. Further refinement to the proposal is still necessary to achieve meaningful results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mechanic. Next, we have Chair of our Planning Board, Artie Harris, and Mr. Harris is speaking to a number of items today, so you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Council President Stewart and members of the County Council. I am Artie Harris, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. On behalf of the Planning Board, I am here to testify in strong support of the More Housing Now package. I want to thank the sponsors, Council Members Friedson and Fanny Gonzalez, and all the co-sponsors for putting together a package that works to address our acute housing crisis in the county. While no single bill is a panacea, the beauty of this package is that it tackles the crisis from numerous perspectives, introducing new housing types, encouraging more workforce housing, and facilitating the conversion of vacant office space to residential. Our county has been steadily losing our middle-income residents. In the past 20 years, we've lost over 26,000 middle-income residents. These are our teachers, first responders, and more who can no longer afford the type of housing they are seeking in our county. We've also seen a continuing decline of housing affordability throughout the whole region. Over the past 20 years, every zip code in the county has lost affordability. For example, in 2000, over 65% of county households could afford to purchase a typical home in zip code 20910, including downtown Silver Spring. By 2022, that number dropped to below 40%. In the zip code 20904, including White Oak, affordability has dropped from 66% of households able to afford to purchase a home down to 47% of households. We are happy to provide numbers for other zip codes if you like. The More Housing Now package adds opportunities in the county to turn around this and create space and incentives for more housing of more types accessible to more residents. The Planning Board previously submitted a climate assessment to Council and met on Thursday, March 26, to review in detail the draft ZTAs, SRA, and bill that make up the More Housing Now package. We have some suggested minor modifications to help strengthen this package to address housing needs throughout the county. While our detailed recommendations are transmitted to the council this morning, I want to take a moment and highlight just a couple of items that I hope you will consider. We recommend exempting small optional method projects from the site plan process or establishing an administrative site plan process that would relieve the development review burden and improve the feasibility of these small projects. In looking at Bill 2-25, we recommend that the council expand the pilot program to include for sale options. Many office to residential conversions that have already occurred or are under development are creating condominiums and not rental units. Our additional technical recommendations are available in our written transmittal. The Planning Board and the Planning Department remain available to support the council as you move this package forward through work sessions. Thank you for keeping the needs of all Montgomery County residents at the forefront of your actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris. Next, we have Rohit Khanna, and I believe, Mr. Khanna, congratulations are in order, because I believe it was just this morning you were appointed as a council member in the town of Somerset, but you are here speaking as an individual, correct?
Yes, thank you very much. As you said, my name is Rohit Khanna. I've been a resident of Montgomery County for 31 years. I want to thank the council members for listening to residents' concerns on AHSI and for the opportunity to speak today. I spent 30 years at the UN and the World Bank advising developing countries on their national strategies. So it concerns me that our county, like many of the countries I worked with, seeks to adopt policies lacking sound data, empirical evidence, and economic analysis. The proposed initiatives will not solve the housing problem in our county and could have significant negative consequences for 3 reasons. First, the lack of public data means that the county is flying blind and taxpayers are being asked to take a leap of faith. We don't know how much housing is needed, how much of this needs to be affordable housing or workforce housing, how much is currently being delivered, and what gap this package and existing policies will fill. The Planning Department is currently analyzing the permitted development pipeline. Regulatory reforms to advance these projects should be prioritized. The county should also evaluate the many existing affordable and workforce housing programs before adding new tools. Second, the county's plan cannot achieve its target of 75% of new housing being affordable because, A, if development provides 85% of new units at market rate and 15% at affordable housing, achieving the affordable housing target is mathematically impossible without a large oversupply of market rate housing. B, upzoning typically replaces existing lower cost housing stock in market preferred areas, reducing housing options for lower income households. C, Upzoning that replaces single-family homes with multifamily dwellings only reduces the supply of single-family homes, thus raising these home prices even more. D, the correlation between new housing supply and affordability is weak. Prices do not vary significantly between markets based on zoning restrictions. Instead, they are influenced by wage levels and land values. It is income inequality that drives the housing affordability problem and explains why there are pervasive shortages nationwide for low-income households. Third, and therefore, the county needs policies that reduce wage polarization and maximizes affordable housing with minimal public spending. The economic efficiency of the proposed payment in lieu of taxes is questionable because its design will overcompensate some projects and lead to revenue loss. Numerous existing exemptions and discounts have already weakened the adequate public facilities concept in Montgomery County, resulting in insufficient funding for transportation and school improvements. Instead, I would suggest the county should provide a larger capital increase to the Housing Production Fund, which uses a very efficient leverage model for mixed income social housing. The county could consider, for example, an ambitious target of 1,000 new affordable units per year over 20 years, which a scaled up HPF can provide the instruments to achieve. The county could also pilot a competitive reverse auction in which public subsidies are provided to developers willing to offer the largest number of affordable units for the lowest tax abatement. In summary, pausing this package would enable the county to formulate a comprehensive, affordable housing strategy with clear targets and cost-effective policies. Additionally, it would allow the county to assess the impacts of federal and state reductions on its population, jobs, tax revenue, and housing market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our first panel of speakers. Next, we will have Samantha DeMato, Jeffrey D., Michelle Penn, Roman Nelson, and Scott Goldberg. And Ms. DeMato, I have you speaking also on Bill 2-25, so you have 5 minutes.
My name is Samantha D'Amato. I am testifying today as the president and on behalf of the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors, whose membership includes 12,000 realtors, property managers, title attorneys, and other real estate professionals, to express our strong support for the More Housing Now legislative package. Lead sponsors, Council Members Friedson and Council Member Fanny Gonzalez, have done this county a service. They have offered multiple solutions to the multifaceted problem of housing. Council President Kate Stewart, Council Members Marilyn Balcombe, Don Lutke, and Lori Ann Sales have signed on as co-sponsors, signaling their strong support for making real positive change happen. In Montgomery County's 2024 resident survey, there was a sharp decline in confidence in this county's efforts to provide housing. From page 8, key findings, declining rates were seen for well-planned residential and commercial growth, well-designed neighborhoods, and variety of housing options. The poll has dozens of other red flags about the direction and quality of our county, with 77 of the 123 annual questions showing a decrease in approval. The survey projected that less than 1/5 of the county residents believe housing affordability and availability are improving. What are you as elected leaders doing to serve the 82% of residents who believe the housing marketplace is stagnant or actively getting worse? As a Montgomery County resident, as a mother of 3 young children, and as a settlement attorney who has seen closing costs drastically increase for buyers and sellers at the settlement table, I find myself in that 82% who do not see any improvement in affordability and availability across the county. Opponents of this legislation continue to spread the malicious narrative that anyone involved developing housing is a millionaire unless they work for nonprofit. The fact is, the real estate industry is a force multiplier for any local economy. The vast majority of those building and maintaining these homes are middle-class, blue-collar workers that our county depends on. According to the United States Bureau of Economic Analysis, the employment multiplier for real estate in Montgomery County was 1.44 in 2023. For every new job in real estate, an additional 0.44 new jobs open in another industry. The multiplier for rental and leasing services were even more significant at 2.20. Another oft-repeated attack on this proposal is that it does not focus on units of affordable to middle income housing, creating opportunities for our teachers, first responders, and other essential workers to live here. Fortunately, that's exactly what ZTA 2502 accomplishes. It incentivizes the creation of and develops better procedures for workforce housing. Like MPDO programs, the More Housing Now legislative package requires more affordable housing to be built, this time targeting middle-income residents without the need for direct economic support that would further empty our already dwindling coffers. Some direct their focus to prioritizing high-yield strategies. The fact is, in our jurisdiction, with our current conditions, there are no single strategies that will produce a high yield of housing for lower and middle income residents. The More Housing legislative package is a strong start. We face a deficit of tens of thousands of rental units that are affordable to incomes within that 70 to 120% of area median income. If not this legislative package, what is the alternative to filling that gap? The firefighters of IAFF, Casa de Maryland, the Maryland County Black Collective, Habitat for Humanity Maryland, Maryland Housing Partnership, and teachers from across the county have publicly endorsed the More Housing Now package. As part of the solution, the populations you say are in need are asking you to help them with this housing package. You've called for any pause on any council action to respond to the well-sourced, expertly crafted attainable housing strategies findings, criticizing those findings for not focusing on housing at the lowest economic level, when that was never its main objective. Your solution will involve more county money without any steps to engage private industry to help solve this problem. Bill 2-25 and Zoning Text Amendment 2503 make development partnerships with private industry more likely, and there is no solution to our housing woes without private industry. Every time we dismiss private industry's role, it makes Montgomery County less attractive to economic development in a time where the state is cutting billions from its budget, shifting more financial responsibility to the county, attempts to further burden residents with more taxes and fees and we're regressive and will set Montgomery County back. We expect this to be the first step in the journey to making Montgomery County an affordable and welcoming place for all. With bold leadership that this legislation represents, we can do great things in service of our community.
Thank you. Mr. D.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey D. Afternoon, sorry. Name is Jeffrey D. I'm the President and CEO of Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland. We are not millionaires, I wish we were, but we are in support of the More Housing Now package, and I want to thank the council members for sponsoring this package and for continuing to prioritize housing affordability along the entire spectrum. And we, of course, appreciate and recognize all the county council has done, already done for affordable housing, and recognize that workforce housing is also needed. This package provides more tools that can help families at various income levels have housing that they can afford. Through our home ownership programs, we have seen firsthand how hardworking families are unable to afford to purchase in Montgomery County, even at the workforce level. For example, according to planning, the only income band that saw a net increase in owner-occupied units between 2010 and 2021 were households earning more than $150,000. Families considered workforce largely earn less than $150,000 a year. We need to produce more units, and we need more funding, as proposed in this package, for down payment assistance to ensure buyers with more moderate incomes can buy homes and build wealth that can then be passed down intergenerationally. We are thrilled to see the doubling of down payment assistance as the current funding is fully spent prior to the end of each fiscal year. We appreciate that this package both focuses on increasing supply but also expands down payment assistance, which is a more immediate solution to help lower and moderate income buyers become homeowners. We need to build more housing typologies. They provide greater choice for purchasers and owners, and typically duplexes and triplexes, etc., are more affordable than single-family homes. We appreciate that the ZTA is a step towards implementing Thrive 2050, which Habitat continues to support. In order to ensure homes are built through the ZTA, it's critical that we look at reducing barriers to creating housing and affordable home ownership opportunities, and to promote certainty for builders and developers, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Penn, and Ms. Penn, you're also speaking on Bill 2-25, so you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Michelle Penn. I've been a Montgomery County resident for the past 12 years in the neighborhood of Kent Mill. I strongly oppose this Housing Now package and urge the council to reject it. I understand that there is an affordable housing problem, but this package is not the answer. Let's start at the concept underlying this package, the 15-minute city. You see, I'm a super active person. Most weekends, you'll see me and my husband out with our 5 kids exploring the bike paths around our neighborhood or exploring a new area in the DMV on our bikes. When I first heard about this concept, I loved the idea. How cool would it be to live in a place where everything you need is within a 15-minute walk or roll of your home? Think about how much healthier we would be. Think how much community we would build by being out and about. If we were starting with a blank plot of land and could build our neighborhood accordingly, then this utopian vision could actually become somewhat realistic. But as you all know, Montgomery County is not a blank plot of land. It is actually a lovely suburban area with its own characteristics that make it unique and a truly lovely, vibrant community. But it is one that is suburban with sprawl, which means it is necessary for a car. And the 15-minute city is a completely unattainable vision to then try to make fit into this already existing community. It's like trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. It just doesn't work. It's actually worse than an unattainable vision. It's actually an existential threat to our community, one that hasn't existed before in the 12 years that I've lived here. How, do you ask? Well, let me tell you, since you certainly didn't ask for my or anyone else's input before creating these proposals. By increasing the density with the Housing Now package, you are adding hundreds and hundreds more people to our neighborhoods and therefore our roads, which are already crowded and busy. Do you know that during busy times, as it currently stands, you can still wait through multiple rounds of lights at 4 corners during rush hour? That traffic on Colesville is so bad that I avoid going downtown to downtown Silver Spring until after 10:30 a.m. on weekdays. This is the reality before you start adding thousands of residents up and down the corridors. And now you're suggesting putting in place traffic calming measures with different corridor plans. To what end? You're going to basically make it virtually impossible to get anywhere in our suburban community. Because guess what? All those people that will live in your workforce housing will have the same problem as we do. They will need their car to get where they need to go. And it won't be because they don't love biking or rolling or public transit, but because we don't live in a 15-minute community, and it can't become that when it's already something else. I have many friends who live in communities in the tri-state area where they have too many residents for the roads. It takes them 30 minutes to go 3 miles. Don't turn our communities into these types of cities. By the way, I checked my mail all last week, certain that there would be something about this upcoming meeting. An initiative that has me so worried for my community? No, not one mailer about this initiative that would forever change the nature of our neighborhood. Even worse, not a single resident of our neighborhood was asked for feedback or input into this plan. Not even our civic association. Okay, fine, maybe it was just our community. No, it's not just us. A colleague actually checked with 21 different civic associations and HOAs around the county. Not a single one was contacted. How is that possible? Who are you here to serve? As your constituents who put you in place, we are feeling completely overlooked and blindsided. I truly believe my community and my neighborhood would be as concerned as I am and would all be here now if they were even aware what was in the works. But today I am here, and these other people are here to show you that we are not voiceless and will not be overlooked in service of a utopian vision that does not belong here. For the record, on this gorgeous day, I thought about biking here. I took a look at how long it would take me, 1 hour and 12 minutes. If this were a 15-minute city, then shouldn't it be that I could bike to this council meeting in 15 minutes? Is the plan to move the council building to be within the 15 minutes of the Housing Now buildings? You and I both know that's not in the plan. That no matter how much you try and force it with these ZTAs, with the corridor plans, and the other packages that you're suggesting, that this round peg is not going to fit into this square hole. Please stop trying. Please reject these ZTAs, and the other packages looking to destroy our vibrant and thriving community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Nelson.
Good evening. My name is Roman Nelson, and I'm a resident of the Woodmore development in Four Corners. I'm here to express my deep concerns about ZTA 25-02 and the significant long-term impacts it will have on our communities, infrastructure, and the fairness of our zoning laws. While the stated goal of increasing workforce housing is important, the way this amendment is structured raises serious concerns about transparency, infrastructure readiness, and unequal application of zoning laws across the county. The Planning Board is bypassing community input. The Montgomery County Civic Federation, MCCF, meeting minutes from September 6 confirm the Planning Board actively discourages developments from working with communities to mitigate project concerns. Projects will bypass public hearings and be approved administratively, leaving residents with no say in what gets built next door. This amendment is as beneficial as claimed, but why does it need to be rushed through with minimal public oversight? Infrastructure concerns are being ignored. No comprehensive infrastructure analysis has been presented to demonstrate that schools, roads, water, and stormwater systems can handle the increase in density. Montgomery County Blair High School is already overcrowded, and no data has been provided to show how additional students will be accommodated. The county's stormwater system is already failing, and the increased impervious surfaces from high-density development will worsen flooding. Why hasn't the county provided a legally required infrastructure impact study before moving forward? Unequal application of zoning. Certain areas are being exempted. This amendment applies to 82% of Montgomery County, yet affluent areas like Potomac have been conveniently excluded from upzoning. The zoning changes stop at River Road. Why does the county apply one set of rules to some neighbors while exempting others? This raises serious fairness and legal questions about the selective application of zoning laws. Legal and procedural issues. Maryland law requires zoning amendments to align with master plans and be supported by infrastructure studies, neither of these of which have been adequately addressed. The Planning Board has ignored master plans and dismissed concerns from its own infrastructure experts. Is this process legally defensible, or is it setting the stage for costly legal challenges? In closing, I urge the Council to pause ZTA 25-02 until a full infrastructure impact study is conducted and a fair, transparent zoning process is restored. The residents of Montgomery County deserve clear answers on how this amendment will impact our schools, roads, and property values. If the goal is to truly support workforce housing, then we must do so responsibly, not by overriding public input and selectively applying zoning laws. Please commit to a transparent, data-driven approach that protects both our communities and the integrity of our zoning system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mr. Goldberg, and you are also speaking on ZTA 25-03, so you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Scott Goldberg on behalf of the Bethesda Chamber of Commerce. It is always a great day when we can take real action so that our kids don't have to move back into our basements. If we take a step outside of the details of more housing now, that's really why we're here, the why. Not necessarily so some future awkward 20-somethings are moving back into our homes, but the why of why we're trying to modestly expand our housing supply. Converting underused office buildings to apartments is a good thing. Allowing for more units to exist on main roads is a good thing. There are people, our friends and neighbors, and those who will never meet, who need and deserve to be able to afford to live near great schools, the schools where they teach, live near great jobs, and stay in the neighborhoods they know and love. Too often, that's not possible in today's Montgomery County. The preamble to our Constitution says one of the main reasons to create our system of government is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Liberty has to include the freedom to afford life's basic necessities, in this case, shelter. And even at the birth of this nation, our foreparents were already thinking of future generations, like passing on a cleaner earth, ensuring that our children, their children, and their children have a framework to enjoy a housing ecosystem better than what we have for ourselves, and that's our responsibility today. And right now, we're going in the other direction. As with most things, the More Housing Now suite of bills probably won't create as much housing as supporters predict, nor will it create as much housing as opponents forecast. But that's okay, because progress is a process, not a single moment. And we have every expectation that the deliberative process and the wisdom of the council members will improve the legislation, taking many of the reasonable suggestions that are made here today. I would like to draw attention to the first person who submitted written testimony. She's 80 years old. She lived in her home on New Hampshire Ave for 42 years, and she's part of the why. She should be able to afford to live in her home for as long as she wants, and more housing means sharing property taxes over a greater number of people, so she doesn't have to shoulder the big increases. She's against more housing now, and she writes, quote, "This proposal easily paves the way for Montgomery County to eventually remove us from our homes in order to implement your latest strategic vision designed to enhance economic development through cleverly obtained land parcels that support the workforce housing initiative. This is a potential land grab, isn't it?" Now, we all know nowhere in the legislation does the county call for eminent domain. It doesn't call for taking people's properties. Change can be scary, and it can lead people to believe things that may not be true. We don't believe that anyone's housing is going to be taken. But as this process continues, debate is good, disagreement is good, questions are good, and we support your continued success and outreach to the community to inform what More Housing Now does and doesn't do, and we offer our partnership in that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. Thank you to everyone who is on this panel. Our next panel will be Jenny Sue Dunner, Patricia Johnson, John Holden, David Barnes, and Lyric Winnick. Okay. Yeah. Ms. Dunner, you can start whenever you're ready.
I'm Jenny Sue Dunner, and I am testifying today on behalf of the Montgomery County Communities Coalition. The coalition represents residents across the county. We were organized well before the first housing proposal was made public. Of course, once that issue captured our attention, the members of the coalition had a ready-made organization where they could share their views and comments. Importantly, we feel strongly about a democratic process, especially one where citizens actively participate in the decision-making process of the government, and one where the citizens' concerns are heard. There is one part, though, of your recent housing proposal that we feel that we can support, that would create an opportunity for converting commercial buildings into residential units of moderate income housing, but without the pilot program of 100% tax abatement. This could be done by appointing an advisory group that would be composed of citizens from all areas of the county, and all advisory group meetings would be public. The idea of an advisory group is not a new concept. It has been used many times over the years in Montgomery County. Also, it furthers the fairness of a democratic process and allows for transparency with the public. If an advisory group was formed, that would allow an opportunity to review and suggest improvements to two of our important current community programs, the Housing Opportunities Commission and the Moderate Price Dwelling Unit Program. I'm not suggesting that they need changes, but it is an opportunity to take a look at the complete picture of the housing process in Montgomery County. Thus, I repeat our position. The coalition is offering a proposal to work with this council through advisory group that, if successful, would create new living units of moderate priced housing in buildings that already have vacancies. And to just end, to say in our mission statement who we are and what we will be continuing to do in the coming months. And I will read from the mission statement, and I also have copies if anyone would like to have one. We work together to ensure that all levels of government, including local and state officials, both elected and appointed, govern and act in an open and transparent manner with maximum input from all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Ms. Johnson.
I'm Patricia Johnson from Kenwood and Chevy Chase. I ask that the council pull ZTA 2502 until residents provide input and we get explanations about its confusing content. This plan was formulated with advice from special interest groups. One of the acknowledged authors is a paid manager for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. Citizens learned of this ZTA when a press release appeared with a photo of council members joined by special interest representatives front and center. The voting public sees this as a conflict of interest and a lack of transparency on the part of the 6 council members who supported the ZTA. Where was the democratic process and community engagement? The ZTA seems purposely hard to understand. There's no legal description of either the corridors that can be developed or the impacted lots. Councilmember Friedson and attorneys have stated that properties can be chained. How do you reconcile height to lot coverage and setbacks between different zone properties assembled? Duplexes have no requirement for workforce housing. All will be priced at market rate. This ZTA package specifies that 85% of housing will be sold at market rate. What happened to promoting MPDUs for the lower income families? Neither the council nor the planning board can answer the major question, what is the actual number of units needed? There are over 30,000 unbuilt units that only need permits pulled. Another 65 units can be realized through municipalities and master plans. Lisa Gavoni, a supervisor with the planning department, says planning will do a deep dive into these 30,000 units and find out why they are not being built. She adds, quote, planning will implement strategies to accelerate the construction of the unbuilt 30,000 unit pipeline. Why don't you do that and get your data straight before this poorly constructed ZTA is passed? Moreover, the planning department states that it has tried workforce housing and hasn't been successful. We are facing a recession. Federal workers in the area are facing major layoffs. As many as 28,000 will lose or have already lost jobs. Real estate development doesn't create jobs. Developers often hire workers from out of state. And that $20 million subsidy for the Jobs Act produced a whopping 30 jobs in the county in 11 months. Our state economy is in trouble. Maryland is ranked 46th on the State Business Tax Climate Index, while Virginia is ranked number 1. While we are facing tax increases, Virginia is making tax cuts. The middle-income population is leaving because of a lack of jobs and rising taxes, not a lack of townhomes or triplexes. Dedicating time and taxpayer money to this badly written and confusing ZTA adds to our costs. Our central focus should be on job creation and private sector growth. People will want to move to this county for a good-paying job and a competitive economy, not for a house. When the biggest employer in the county is the county and federal government, you have a poor economic plan. Please stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holden?
My name is John Holden. I've lived more than 30 years in Montgomery County, 22 years in South Four Corners, which borders both University Boulevard and US 29. The county has a shortage of affordable housing. Unfortunately, this legislation will provide workforce housing in only 15% of the housing units in triplexes and larger properties. The other 85% will simply be more market rate housing, which will not address the shortage of affordable housing. Planning zone studies show that the new market rate homes will be as expensive or more expensive than the housing stock that they replace. Also, the new housing will not lead to more home ownership by residents who will be outbid by institutional investors looking to build expensive and lucrative rental properties. The county has had a workforce housing program for many years, but it has not solved the problem. There is almost nothing in the current legislation to indicate that this proposal will be any less of a failure. Perhaps Council VP Juando's upcoming pipeline housing bill will begin to address the problem. The new development will increase demand on overburdened infrastructure and services, schools, water and sewer, policing, etc. It's not clear that sufficient infrastructure will be in place to accommodate the planned development, or that the county's growth and infrastructure policy will be adequately funded to pay the cost of the needed additional infrastructure. This legislation and the corridor plans that will follow it are based on BRT routes that, in many cases, have not even been studied, much less funded or built. These changes should not take place until a satisfactory BRT is fully funded for the corridor in question and the BRT is within a year or two of completion. Also, most new households on these transit corridors will still have cars that must be parked on already crowded and narrow neighborhood streets. Please address this in the legislation. If this legislation moves forward, the changes must be limited to properties that front directly on a corridor road and not a chained parcel with other lots that are deeper within the neighborhood, the residential neighborhood. One of the ZTA sponsors has repeatedly said that this package does not propose any zoning changes within the residential neighborhoods. So please suspend work on this legislation until, 1, we know what's happening with the federal government and who's going to have jobs. 2, we know the details of the state's pending Housing for Jobs Act, which could override this CTA. And 3, a BRT is fully funded for each of the corridors. Please do not deal with a housing affordability and home ownership crisis by doubling down on a failed strategy. Thank you.
Mr. Barnes?
Thank you. My name is David Barnes. I represent the Edgemoor Citizens Association. It's a community association of over 500 homes immediately west of the Central Business District in Bethesda. I want to thank Councilmember Friedson and Fanny Gonzalez for developing this proposal, which is a big improvement over the attainable housing strategy. I hope that it's a first step toward thinking differently about how to help all people who are priced out of the housing market. Although the county's MPDU program may be good, it only helps a small portion of those people. It could use an update also for what that's worth if you're looking for your next project. It's obvious that a lot of work went into this, and it seems to be on a fast track. There's already a work session planned for the end of March, and I appreciate that you're doing something and that you want to do it soon. But this is a complicated plan unveiled just a few weeks ago with limited public input and limited public outreach. Please take your time. There's some good ideas here, but people have only begun to dig into the specifics and identify potential problem areas. I have 3 comments already. First, I hope that you'll reject planning's recommendation to eliminate the site plan step in evaluating developments. The site plan is where nearby residents have the most meaningful opportunity for input into a development plan and have their concerns heard. I hope if you hope to rebuild trust in residents which have been eroded by AHSI, this is not the way to do it. Second, please do not make unilateral reductions in the off-street parking requirements. You've already reduced parking minimums within a half mile of transit, and there's no reason to extend that here. Parking circumstances vary significantly and are unique to every site. Reducing all minimums along these corridors will adversely affect nearby smaller streets where residents will certainly go to look for parking spaces. The parking requirements should be addressed at the site plan and reflect the circumstances of that area. Finally, the ZTA should clarify and be explicit about all of the rules for lot consolidation and aggregation and limits on lot size. Be clear about what's allowed and what's not allowed. You've frequently talked about how compact these new developments will be. If you aren't painfully clear about these issues in the rules, we will end up with rows of townhouses or apartments consolidating multiple properties and extending it to non-corridor lots within neighborhoods through creative lot massing. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Ms. Winnick?
Thank you. I'm Lyric Winnick from Chevy Chase. I helped start the countywide Press Pause Coalition. I've raised 2 sons here as a full-time working single mother and spent 15 years as a parent trying to improve MCPS. I'm asking you to press pause and revise this package. I also want more affordable and workforce housing options. but the numbers being used by ZTA advocates simply don't add up, and bad math risks making a bad situation worse. The first problem is the assumption that building more housing is somehow cost-free to communities. An 85-15 split means that to get 3,000 workforce units, you need to build at least an additional 17,000 market-priced units. Every unit needs additional services: fire, EMS, and police, sewers, roads, and schools. Where will that capacity come from, and who pays? County planners may tell you that BCC High School is still a few students from full utilization. What they won't tell you is that BCC has 660 farm students and a cafeteria that holds 330. Half the students who need school meals today cannot fit. Capacity issues for schools, hospitals, and first responders must be calculated and addressed. The ZTA advocates are unfortunately also selling you bad math. Many of these new units must use a condo structure, yet condo fees often outpace mortgage costs and property taxes. Even worse, advocates conflate mean housing cost and median income, which calculate two different things. It should be median housing prices and median income. The result, the numbers you are relying on have been distorted, sometimes up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. But more is at stake than simply housing supply. We have a household affordability crisis in this county. Here's the hard math I and many other residents live with every month. Before making any mortgage payment, my property taxes have risen by more than 29% in the last 4 years, and I don't even have my 2025 bill. My home and car insurance rose 37% in the last year. My February electric bill is now more than my July electric bill of 2 years ago. My self-employed family health insurance on the Maryland Exchange is $24,000 per year. Just waking up and breathing each day in this county costs tens of thousands of dollars a year, outside of the sales price of any home. More expensive market-priced housing will only drive up overall costs. The last parts of the affordability crisis are a lack of job growth and what was the county's jewel, MCPS. Confidence in our schools is plummeting, and residents are voting with their feet. 2 of my neighbors with young kids are leaving, one for Virginia and one for DC. It's hard to tackle these serious issues, but you must. Please work with your talented residents, not oppose them. We should all want the same thing, a Montgomery County where people want to live, not feel forced to leave.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Our next group of speakers is Tony Byrne, Marla Schulman, Lee Henry, Patrick Haney, Kevin Bromberg. Okay, Mr. Byrne, you can kick us off when you're ready.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Tony Byrne. I live in North Woodside, and I own a small business headquartered on Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring. This package will affect me directly by enabling additional housing in my neighborhood, along my commute, and near my workplace. This is why I sit here in favor of this package with an amendment. This is personal for our family. Our adult child presently lives in New York. He might wish to return to Maryland to advance his career and start a family, but the dearth of housing options, particularly the kinds of walkable, bikeable, transit-rich communities that his generation increasingly seeks, will likely prevent him from doing so. He will likely never be able to live in the neighborhood where he grew up, our neighborhood today, which, like most county residential neighborhoods, no longer provides starter home opportunities. This is why I urge you to amend this package to allow a wider variety of home types near rail stations as well as on major county corridors, excluding the Ag Reserve. Now, I'd like to switch hats and speak to you as an owner of a consulting business in Montgomery County, where I recruit young professionals to work in our great state. Prospective recruits tell me about intense competition for scarce housing options, especially near transit, leaving them on the sidelines. As a business person, I understand these forces of supply and demand, and in our housing market, they are real. Growing evidence around the country shows that economic vitality depends on increasing the housing stock in an era of declining household sizes. So now this becomes a fiscal issue. More homes means a broader county tax base at a time when I trust you agree we need to pull every available lever on the revenue side of the budget. Now, I recognize that you face powerful forces opposing attempts to meaningfully increase the volume and diversity of the county's housing stock. I've heard these voices echo for 30 years that I've been living in this county, consistently saying that now is not the right time, or we need to study more. This has been going on for 30 years, and meanwhile, the shortage of homes has evolved from inconvenience to significant problem to major crisis. Today, the county faces two demographic futures. The default path we're on right now is aging, static, amenity poor, economically divided, and car-centered, with an emphasis on home ownership only attainable for those with generational wealth. The other path offers multi-generational opportunity, economic dynamism and fiscal health, more multicultural communities, and the resilience that always comes with greater diversity. Right now, we're not headed on that second path. It will take leadership to get us there. I'm asking you today to lead. Please advance this package with the amendment I proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shulman.
Good afternoon. My name is Marla Shulman, and I live in Bethesda, and I am a near lifelong resident of Montgomery County. I'm an active member of the local Jewish community, including as a member of B'nai Israel congregation, and I help to organize my congregation's participation in Action in Montgomery, and I serve on the board of AIM. My husband and I raised two children here, now 22 and 25, and in our family, the only way they would be able to live in Montgomery County would be if we subsidize them. At this point, there isn't a single one of our friends whose recently college graduated children is able to afford to live here on their own without some kind of assistance. Maryland's population is declining, and 2 out of every 3 people leaving are young adults. These are bright and talented individuals who are choosing to set down roots elsewhere instead of here in Montgomery County. What a tremendous loss. I've also been a small business owner here in the county for more than 30 years. My business model is such that the majority of my employees serve in entry-level positions. I've been so proud over the years to employ many graduates of local universities who have come to settle in Montgomery County. However, it has become increasingly difficult for my small business to pay such young adults a salary that would enable them to live here locally. In fact, during the pandemic, we went fully remote and have stayed that way since. And the sad reality is that as a result, we've been able to hire a more affordable workforce by hiring those living outside the area. Now, the 200,000 square foot building around the corner from here, in which I'm still paying out a lease for office space, sits nearly empty and is in bankruptcy. So at the same time, we don't have enough housing that's affordable for a new young adult workforce. We also have countless empty commercial buildings that are very expensive for developers to repurpose as residential. The More Housing Now bill would encourage the conversion of highly vacant offices to housing through an expedited approval process and a housing property tax abatement pilot program for projects meeting affordability requirements. It will also incentivize workforce housing along corridors and add an additional $4 million in funding to the county's FY26 Housing Initiative Fund. This bill is not the total answer, but it is a start. And I support it and want to thank Council members Friedson, Fanny Gonzalez, Balcom, Ludke, Stewart, and Sales for their support of it. Creating more supply is a key part of the solution. According to a Greater Washington survey, 71% of voters believe the government should reduce barriers to building new housing. Expanding the supply helps make housing prices more affordable for everyone. Next year, my synagogue will celebrate our 100-year anniversary, and we're working hard to reimagine how we can evolve to continue serving this community for the next 100 years. I love living in Montgomery County and am proud of our great diversity. We also need to work hard to make sure our county continues to be a place that people are proud to call home, and this bill is a start in ensuring our healthy economic future, which is a critical part of that hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Shulman. Next is Lee Henry.
My name is Lee Henry, and I'm speaking as an individual.
I applaud this legislation and the compromises that it required. Its goals of increasing housing supply, reducing cost, and increasing pathways to home ownership are key components of economic development. Housing Now represents our best current opportunity for development of housing that meets the needs of prime wage earners aged 25 to 54, a key cohort that is leaving the county at a rate that is 5 times that of the region. Our economic vitality is linked to creating jobs and attracting highly educated young professionals. We are not doing that now. Highly educated professionals are not purchasing homes in neighborhoods served by low-performing schools, but finding housing unaffordable in neighborhoods served by schools with top ratings. Housing Now's $25,000 down payment incentive could be an important tool encouraging first-time home buyers to invest in affordable neighborhoods and to demand school rating improvements. To justify the taxpayers' contribution, these funds should be awarded to those who purchase in neighborhoods with low-performing schools. Housing Now appropriately shifts the focus to corridors and away from thriving neighborhoods with high-performing schools. It better addresses the needs of young scientists and engineers drawn to career opportunities in life science, technology, and medical industries, primarily located up county along I-270. The vacant commercial to housing component of this legislation is a forward-looking, innovative strategy. It encourages the development of new visions for neighborhoods undermined by failing commercial buildings. This element encourages neighborhoods to evolve to better meet emerging needs. I was pleased to see planning commissioners reject a requirement that vacant commercial spaces remain boarded up for an extended period before becoming eligible for the pilot program. It's hard to see the win in that. Housing Now is a component of the toolbox we need to arrest decline and jumpstart neighborhood revitalization through support of home ownership, lower cost, more efficient housing forms, and encouragement of new visions for neighborhoods that replaces failed commercial buildings with in-demand housing. It is my hope that this is the first step towards a bigger vision. Our bolder vision should include regulatory reform, additional tools for encouraging neighborhood revitalization, encouragement of missing middle housing forms, including ADUs, and commercial to housing incentives.
Thank you very much. Next is Patrick Haney.
Good afternoon, council members and fellow citizens. It is my genuine pleasure to speak before you today about the important matter of housing supply in our county and in support of the ZTA. My name is Patrick Haney. I'm 26 years old, and I have been a resident of the county for just about 3 years now. My fiance, who couldn't be here today, has called the county home for all but 1 year of her life. We are both currently renters in Gaithersburg. My residency here has been brief, and I hope to offer a perspective that is often underrepresented in this conversation. As young adults not yet on the property ladder and amid ever-growing housing costs, our prospects for purchasing a home of any kind here in my fiance's home seem depressingly bleak. We have well-paying jobs. I'm an aerospace engineer, she's a software developer. And yet the unyielding high price of housing in MoCo pushes us to look elsewhere for a place to put down roots. It just makes more economic sense. Another county in which to live, to work, to pay taxes, and to stimulate the economy. This current status quo, which drives away current and prospective residents like us, will have negative economic, social, and environmental consequences for our county for decades to come. The proposed ZTA we are discussing today is an important first step in allowing our woefully insufficient housing supply to approach demand, and just as importantly, allowing for a more diverse stock of housing that reflects the diverse needs of our many residents. And yes, that housing stock must include new market rate housing to have a true and lasting effect. Housing stock does not exist in a vacuum, and changes in supply will have a ripple effect throughout the whole system. Personally, I had hoped for more ambitious legislation, more in line with the Planning Board's AHS proposal from last year. And I still hope someday we will have something that further facilitates a vibrant and diverse housing stock, especially in proximity to our transit resources. But I enthusiastically welcome this critical first step. I respectfully urge the council to listen to the voices outside of this hearing room calling for actions on housing prices, voices that lack the time and resources to be here on a Tuesday afternoon. Please pass this compromise legislation for the good of our county, our citizenry, our whole citizenry, across classes, across generations. As the name accurately captures, we need bold action now.
Thank you. Mr. Bromberg, you have 5 minutes. You're also speaking on Bill 2-25.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President Stewart and council members. I'm Kevin Bromberg, a resident of Chevy Chase, Maryland. We'll start from the top. I'm strongly opposed to the More Housing Now initiative. The sponsors of this initiative have been misleading the public. The press release makes no mention of the fact that upzoning are permitted by the ZTAs, nor does it address the intent to upend single-family housing. Even Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez admitted in her recent video that upzoning is allowed under this plan. To address this problem, there needs to be direct notification of affected residents on and nearby affected corridors. Additionally, the council needs to perform a thorough study of the alternatives to upzoning single-family neighborhoods. One of the speakers just said we've been waiting 30 years and we're waiting for a study. Well, we're waiting for a study too. When I spoke in Bethesda, Chevy Chase, I said we learned in elementary school to show your work. Where is your work? When there's no work done, then it causes the citizens to react as you're seeing here. So this morning I got another email that said homes are too expensive in Montgomery County due in large part to the housing crisis. We are losing young professionals. All of this is true. But neither of these points mean that these plans that are being presented, just like AHSI, are supported by sound analysis or indeed any analysis, nor will they achieve the goal of affordable housing, as I explained in more detail. So I've reviewed more than 1,000 emails between October 2024 and February 2025, and I have other things to do in my life, but I thought it was important that I do that. There are hundreds of emails from individual residents and numerous civic associations. Unlike the council's erroneous counts from last fall, I counted approximately a ratio of 5-to-1 in opposition to the previous AHSI. No civic associations supported AHSI. Of those emails in opposition, there were dozens detailing specific and well-supported objections to the AHSI plan. They often reflected deep analyses from professionals with expertise in economics and other relevant backgrounds. And I know what I speak. I have 40 years plus in the federal government working on environmental problems. In contrast, the minority of individuals supporting AHSI appear to be using form letters with identical language generated by organized lobbying groups. For the most part, these letters show no evidence that the authors had even read the plan. And I'm not sure that situation has changed. So this is a fraud being perpetuated on the citizens of Montgomery County. The current ZTA was apparently created without input from citizen groups that uniformly opposed the previous AHSI. In contrast, I was told by a council staff member that specific lobbying groups and housing activists were briefed on the content of the ZTAs days before the January 28th press conference. So is this really the product of a consensus of the community, or is it something that's in favor of one side? I also know that of the 4 council members, including Councilman Friedson, with the highest contributions from realtors, 3 support the current ZTA. I thank the 4th Councilmember Katz, who is not supporting the ZTA and is free to vote his conscience because I think he's not running for re-election, which I'm sad to hear. In any event. So is more housing now good for the county, or is it good for realtors and builders? There are many elements that are common to both the ZTA and the forerunning AHSI plan. These common elements point to one conclusion. More housing now needs to be withdrawn, and the county needs to return to the master plan process. There is no analysis of the need for additional housing in the county, relying instead on outdated predictions. There's no analysis of alternative approaches to produce affordable housing at less cost. There is no analysis of housing units in the pipeline. There is no analysis whether the master plan would accommodate future housing needs. Research by a professor of UCLA showed there's no relationship between upzoning and housing costs. They do not go down. There is no restriction on the price of these units, and therefore no real attempt to create affordable or workforce housing, despite the rhetoric behind the new ZTAs. If that truly was the intent behind these ZTAs, then why isn't affordable housing the object of this legislation? There's no analysis of the various adverse impacts you've heard from various people: traffic, tree canopy, stormwater, you name it. It's not been analyzed. Regarding the new pilot legislation, this bill is unaffordable. It provides an unnecessary incentive.
Thank you, Ms. Bromberg. That's your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to this panel of speakers. Next, we have Dick Pavlin, Marianne Dillon, Kara Kasicki, Gordy Bren, and Elizabeth Joyce. Okay. Mr. Pavlin, you can start when you're ready.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Pavlin, member of St. Mark Presbyterian Church and AIM congregation, testifying in support of ZTA 2502. Thank you to council members Balcom, Friedson, Gonzalez, Ludke, Sales, and Stewart for co-sponsoring this important amendment. The State Department of Housing analyzed the needs for housing in all Maryland counties in relation to the number of jobs in each county. Montgomery County has 741,956 jobs and needs 31,364 new housing units for current job workers working here. The gap between the number of jobs and the number of housing units is stifling economic growth in both the county and the state. Maryland's GDP grew only 1.6% from 2016 to 2023. Virginia's GDP, by comparison, grew 11.2%. Younger workforce members are leaving Maryland at an alarming rate. Nearly 40,000 younger workers left the state in 2022 to work and live elsewhere, primarily due to the cost of housing. This exodus from Maryland of younger workers is my family story. My son Andrew left Maryland after working here his first year out of college because the cost of living and especially housing were beyond his reach. The only reason my daughter Emily stays here is because we helped her pay for a one-bedroom apartment she couldn't afford on her own. She earned below the per capita income in the county. So Governor Moore's housing bill for jobs asks counties to boast new housing permits to close the gap between the number of jobs and the number of housing units. Our county averages 2,017 housing permits a year. The gap is over 31,000 units. Changing our zoning to allow more than only single-family homes to be built on land that abuts growth corridors where density is already present aligns with the governor's focus on building more housing. In conclusion, a Greater Washington poll of 820 Maryland voters taken last week found 73% of them believe building more housing makes communities more accessible to all types of people, not just the rich. Our housing crisis is deepening, we're losing our younger workers, and we have meager economic growth. We need to approve this CTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Marianne Dillon.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, President Stewart, Vice President Joando, and members of the council. I'm Marianne Dillon. I live in Bethesda, and I'm here to speak in strong support of zoning text amendment 25-02. I'm a retired affordable housing professional, and I'm passionate about making Montgomery County accessible and affordable to all who live and work here. My family is one of the lucky ones. We live in a single-family home, walking distance to Metro in the Walter Johnson High School cluster. We moved here 22 years ago, and we clearly could never afford to move back into the neighborhood today, as so many of the modest 1950s-style homes have been torn up and replaced by huge single-family homes that could actually accommodate multiple families. The vast majority of the county's developable land is zoned single-family. We simply can't afford to continue this low-density pattern of development that forces families to live further and further away from the urban core, from jobs, and from Metro. CTA 25-2 allows slightly denser housing along high-traffic corridors throughout the county. Many of these corridors are no longer attractive for single-family homes given the volume of traffic generated, so a higher density use seems very appropriate. Montgomery County has fallen way behind in housing production necessary to sustain population growth. Our county is growing because it's a desirable place to live, with plenty of employment opportunities. If we want to protect our open spaces, higher density housing in already developed areas has got to be a big part of the solution. I want to focus on a few of the objections that we often hear raised about this zoning change. First, that this zoning will not solve our housing crisis. No, it will not solve it, but it's an important piece of the puzzle. We must try a wide range of solutions, and changing density, even modestly, will make a difference in the long run. Second, I don't want to lose the suburban character of my neighborhood. This proposal will allow, but not require, slightly denser housing along select major residential corridors. These changes will not come overnight, but can make a positive difference over, say, a 50-year horizon. Number three, our schools are already overcrowded. The modest nature of this zoning change means that there will not be any dramatic changes to school age population in any given cluster. Also, small multifamily buildings mean smaller apartments, not suitable for larger families. And four, this is too small of a proposal to make a difference. Yeah, I'd like to see more too, but this legislation encourages workforce housing production. It would be a great test case for providing new opportunities for the majority of our residents who can no longer afford a single-family home. In closing, I urge the County Council to pass this common sense legislation. I suggest two amendments. First, to increase the height limit from 40 feet, where appropriate, on sites not adjacent to single-family homes. Second, to allow more flexibility in setbacks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Ms. Carrie Kasicki, who will speak for 5 minutes. She's speaking also on ZTA 25-03 and Bill 2-25.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Carrie Kasicki, and I'm the Montgomery County Advocacy Manager for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. We believe that building walkable, bikeable, transit-oriented communities with housing that all people can afford is the most sustainable and inclusive way for our region to grow. So it will not be surprising to hear that we support this legislation. So I'm here today to offer our support for this package and to say thank you to the sponsors for stepping up and showing that this county is ready to do what is needed to address our housing crisis. It is a plain and simple fact that our county needs more housing. People want housing that they can afford, and they do not want to have to spend their lives sitting in traffic just to get to work. Nothing demonstrates the strong support for these simple ideas more than the broad, diverse coalition that showed up in support of the announcement of this package. I was immensely proud, I would say the proudest moment I've had in this role for the 2.5 years that I've worked here, to stand alongside teachers, firefighters, CASA, Action in Montgomery, leaders from the business community, affordable housing providers, and more at that press conference, all of whom have felt the toll of our affordability crisis in housing, felt the toll it's taking on our communities, and all of whom are ready to see this council take action. This county has a strong record of supporting subsidized affordable housing, including making historic commitments to funding for affordable housing these past few years. This is critical work that makes our county a better and more inclusive place. But we have not been innovators in the same way when it comes to making sure our county has homes that are affordable to our middle class, or to young people, or to people looking to downsize and stay in the county. And I could go on. We all know people who have struggled to afford housing, and I'm one of them. We've heard a lot about young people who can't afford to live here, who work here. We haven't seen a lot of them. We've seen maybe one. Hi. I am one of them, so I'll speak for myself here. I'm 25 years old. I moved here after college for work. I did not grow up here, and I absolutely love this county. I work here. I've built a community here. I want to stay. But as I made the transition recently from living in a group house with 3 roommates, which I was ready to be done with, to looking for a place of my own, it was nearly impossible to find an apartment I could afford. In fact, I ended up jumping on a studio apartment that was a few $100s above my budget because I knew it was the only thing even close to what I was going to be able to find, and it's a real stretch. So I made the choice to stay in this county and to try to save in other areas of my life so that I can afford it. But that is not the choice that everybody makes when they face the undeniable structural issue of the lack of affordable homes that we have to offer near transit and jobs. And I would add as well that that has to include market rate homes. I live in market rate housing. I believe that, I should be able to afford market rate housing. I'm above the threshold to qualify for affordable housing. But I live in market rate housing that I can barely afford. And I think many people are in that situation. And so we have to acknowledge that there are certain housing needs in this county that lie somewhere in between folks who can comfortably afford the market rate homes that exist and folks who are served by affordable housing. And I believe that's what this legislation seeks to address, which is really important. So when we don't build that kind of housing, people end up looking for homes farther out from their jobs, they have longer commutes, they generate more traffic, more emissions, or they might simply turn away from our county and choose to live and work elsewhere where they can find housing they can afford. This hurts our ability to retain a strong workforce, it diminishes our tax base, and our ability to fund critical social services and programs, including affordable housing. What kind of a place are we if we look around and see people who desperately want to live and work here and be part of our communities, but can't because we are refusing to build the kinds of housing they need? What would that say about us? This is why this legislation matters, because every sponsor and every vote for this package is a declaration that this county is not okay with being the kind of place that would turn people away because they can't afford it. Instead, we are ready to do new things. We are ready to build housing in a way that works for our economy, supports diversity, and preserves and protects the health of our environment. We're ready to acknowledge there are housing needs that our existing policies do not meet, and we are ready to do the right thing. Are there ways I think this legislation could be stronger? Yes, you will not be surprised to hear that. Many of our partners in affordable housing have already mentioned that. We would love to see more areas around transit be included, and also for the council to continue to consult with partners in affordable housing to reduce barriers to building these homes. And all of that is important, but I don't want to lose sight of what I see as the most important part of this package. I think it's a watershed moment for our county that we will look back on as when we finally decided that it was time for a new approach to provide people the housing they need. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. I am really excited. I think this is a great moment. You have more support than you know, and so I ask you to support this package and keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Brennan.
Gordy Burney with the Taxpayers League. Good afternoon. This bill is a big improvement over planning's recent attainable housing proposal, and we support it with an amendment. The ZTA is limited to housing fronting on corridors. That's good, so it doesn't go into neighborhoods, thereby limiting density's impact. Also, workforce housing will not be by right. That's also good. This will allow neighborhood controls over what's built. The downside is there's no estimate for the supply of new units, making it impossible to estimate infrastructure costs as well as the demand for subsidies. Taxpayer housing subsidies have been reserved in the past for affordable housing. That's for those with incomes below 80% AMI. Now, in an effort to revive housing starts, subsidies for market rate housing are being proposed for developers and first-time home buyers. This could reduce resources for true affordable housing, and it could be made less costly by simply getting rid of the regulations that drive up costs and reduce housing supply. So this ZTA is a workaround that could increase supply enough to lower prices, but it could also be inflationary by eliminating pre-existing attainable housing and artificially stimulating first-time buyer demand with subsidies. The reason governments traditionally don't subsidize market rate housing is because artificial demand increases are inflationary. This is particularly a problem in a period when supply has been constrained by higher interest rates and lower turnover. When interest rates come down and turnover resumes, housing inflation pressures will mount. The adverse effects of this ZTA, the potential adverse effects, need to be closely monitored. Further, the best way to justify this subsidy risk for middle-class housing is if it generates county revenues to offset the subsidy and related infrastructure costs. This could come from property taxes, but those revenues will be deferred because the state doesn't immediately reassess tear-down rebuilds. However, recordation and transfer taxes are another revenue source that's been sagging recently, and that could be stimulated by the CTA. An amendment's needed for an annual report to the Council on affordability of prices paid for housing built under this ZTA and corridors developed. The number of naturally occurring affordable units replaced should also be tracked to minimize adverse impacts, as should projected infrastructure costs. Include a sunset for subsidies if they exceed additional revenues, and don't produce target housing pricing in target corridors or exceed expectations for naturally occurring affordable housing and infrastructure costs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Ms. Joyce, and you have 5 minutes because you're also speaking on Bill 2-25.
Good afternoon, Council President Stewart, my personal council member. I'm Elizabeth Joyce from Silver Spring, and somewhat humbled to be the skunk at the garden party in this panel. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak about more housing now. Housing is the most important cost of living issue facing our...
Ms. Joyce, can you get a little closer to the microphone?
Sure.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Housing is the most important cost of living issue facing our entire nation right now. So Montgomery County must get this right. First, thanks to the sponsors for heeding residents' concerns about previous plans and about the need for alternative solutions such as converting commercial buildings to housing and increasing workforce housing and down payment assistance, as well as the change recently mentioned, not requiring these changes to be by right. These are absolutely a step in the right direction and a welcome act of good faith. However, certain problems remain. Under ZTA 2502, despite its workforce housing name, most new housing would be market rate, and the workforce housing program itself has not had significant success. The county does face a housing shortfall. We all know that, and we all know the nature of the problem. But this proposal does little to address the most important problem, affordability. And I want to stop for a minute. Many of the advocates of this and previous controversial proposals have suggested that having a great lofty goal is the way to get there. But as Mr. Khanna so eloquently pointed out, you have to do it in a fact-based numerical way or you don't get where you want to be. And this is the problem that we're dealing with. Although recent projections about the actual number of needed units are now in question, the Council of Governments estimates that the majority of new residents in the coming decades will be low income, making under $50,000. This proposal will do nothing for them, or very little, because most new housing will be market rate. Nothing wrong with market rate, but it serves its own purpose, and developers have every right to make money. The workforce housing program requires that buyers live in their units and observe certain restrictions. Will CTA 2502 include these requirements, which would discourage the purchase of these units by speculators and absentee landlords, as happened in Minneapolis, by the way, taking money out of the county rather than spending it here and paying taxes here? Will these units be equitably distributed throughout the county or concentrated in already dense areas with small lots, like where I live? How many current lower-income residents will be displaced on such corridors as Georgia Avenue and Veers Mill Road in Wheaton, with those lovely little well-taken-care-of houses that could be, upended by having a huge house next to them and everybody else selling? How will this CTA relate to the highly complex corridor plans now being introduced and generating controversy in such communities as Kemp Mill, as we've heard earlier? Many concerns about the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative also apply to this new plan, particularly on heavily traveled corridors. The county now has huge infrastructure problems, and not just on the corridors, but for example, one night this winter, 130 pipes burst county-wide, causing the county to issue an order to conserve water, and that is with the infrastructure we have now. How are we going to pay for what is needed for these new units? It makes no sense to build any new housing without analyzing the infrastructure and planning how to pay for these needs. Despite recent incentives such as increasingly lower impact taxes, the needed development fails to appear, and more than 30,000 approved units in the pipeline remain unbuilt. Why, and who will pay for this infrastructure? The current taxpayers, already groaning under their property tax burden and will be groaning under perhaps under the governor's proposals, will be carrying the burden for this. Montgomery County is steadily losing middle-class taxpayers, often for these reasons. My second focus is Bill 225, Payment in lieu of taxes, which offers a 25 property 25-year property tax holidays to specify developers for converting commercial properties. It seems reasonable to ask why at this time of financial crisis in the federal government and the county, the council should consider such an expensive proposition. We don't know where we are now, and this could be catastrophic for the county and its economic health. So that's a reason to step back for a while. Also, regardless of the timing, the council has tended to pass giveaways to developers with no strings attached to encourage more housing production. For example, how many units were built under the recent bill that gave similar tax breaks to developers of units over metro stations? I don't know, but I suspect it hasn't been gargantuan or we would have heard about it. Not only that, but the Office of Legislative Oversight Racial Equity Study predicts a negative impact on minorities, likely benefiting landlords and tenants who can afford market rate housing. OLL says the bill could widen existing racial disparities and impair the county's financial ability to provide public goods and services for the BIPOC community. So this is why I think it's time to suspend this bill, despite its
Thank you,
admirable
Ms.
qualities.
Joyce. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, on this panel. Our next panel is Katie Erkseg, Melissa McKenna, David Johnson, Susan Gallagher, and Benjamin Ross. Katie Erkseg can start when you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Erkseg, and I address you as a lifelong resident of Sections 3 and 5. I might not have much experience with government or policy issues, as so many of my accomplished neighbors do, but I can say with conviction that I know a great deal about my neighborhood. It is my love of the neighborhood which compelled me to volunteer with the Chevy Chase Historical Society in previous summers, and it is also this innate appreciation which compels me to oppose the proposed legislation, an act incompatible with the area's already burdened infrastructure and unrepresentative of local voices and interests. My experience as both someone who grew up in the affected area and as a current college student, likely two perspectives underrepresented today, give me particular insight in these dimensions. The abundance of cars completely overburdens inadequate infrastructure. In experience with the Chevy Chase Historical Society, I saw how Montgomery County really developed as a streetcar suburb in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. While the original rail lines and trolleys have virtually disappeared, more unwelcome traces linger, namely streets and neighborhoods designed without any consideration for cars. These narrow streets already pose major complications to parking, and the proposed legislation would certainly only inflame this issue. This glaringly apparent deficiency also represents far more complex and less readily observed environmental implications to the area, not to mention resident safety. This dimension greatly concerns me as a resident with an understanding of local history. The relationship which this proposed legislation creates between developers and local jurisdictions only inflames such implications. Effectively transferring development power to those with monetary rather than community interests creates a worrying dynamic. Developers owe little allegiance to the proposed proclamation of affordable housing or the well-being of existing and future residents. As a student, the proposal and execution of this legislation disheartens me on a more ideological premise. In this area more than any, the importance of observing democratic representation and transparency should appear evident, yet limited public input and outreach have made for a flawed proposal. I urge you to pursue a more nuanced legislation reflective of all community interests, especially those who cannot attend this meeting today on a Tuesday at 1:30. I thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Ms. McKenna?
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa McKenna. What homeowner would do this to their own property? Would you? How would you feel if you saw your house highlighted on the accompanying map? Would you feel targeted for possible taking under eminent domain? How can you ensure that developers won't buy up these properties? Because this looks like a guide for them to know which houses to go after when the owner dies and the family needs to sell the house to pay the taxes on the supposed generational wealth. Have you looked at the map? I mean, looked. The parcels identified are, well, interesting. Included are parks, houses of worship, government services, and lots of schools. In no order. Glenmont Forest Park and Kensington Volunteer Fire Station number 18, Black Hill Regional Park, Saddlebrook Local Park, Gaithersburg Library, Rockville Volunteer Fire Station number 31, the former landfill on East Goody Drive in Rockville, the Barry Day School, St. Bernadette Catholic Church and School across from Blair High School, in Olney, St. Peter's Catholic Church and School, St. John's Episcopal Church and School, B'nai Shalom of Olney and School, then Shady Grove and Eastern Middle Schools, Seneca Valley, Quince Orchard, Northwood, and Kennedy High Schools. My favorites? Georgetown Prep, Strathmore, and Blair High School. The parcels along Randolph Road, for example, are small, starter-sized, attainable single-family housing, privately owned and occupied, and often have a small home business on site. These lots typically have a steep front grade and require at least 2 adjacent properties and significant earth moving to make a triplex or 4-unit townhouse. And how are they not part of a residential neighborhood just because they aren't in the middle and the rest of their neighbors are behind them? There's a good way to do workforce housing, and this proposal is not that way. I will provide in my written testimony a few examples of Teachers Village in Newark, New Jersey, and Hartford, Connecticut. And in Maryland, row home-style teacher housing was completed in Baltimore just last fall. I'd provide more, but then what would I have to run on? What happened to the APFO part of the growth and infrastructure policy? You know, having adequate public facilities, water, sewer, stormwater management, fire and police coverage, school capacity. Oh, my bad. That was the subdivision staging policy, and the GIP pretty much wrote that all out. Land use planning provides an overall vision. Zoning implements specific regulations to achieve those goals. In neither case should it encourage haphazard insertions of random housing types everywhere, which is what I foresee. What I read in this legislation is a backdoor introduction of the main tenet behind the Attainable Housing Initiative, upzoning of single-family residential, wrapped in a disguise of highly detailed physical plans and nomenclature.
Thank you,
Please
Ms.
remove
McKenna.
the broad brushstroke and revisit this plan after
Next, we
you
have
remove
Mr.
those.
Johnson.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Johnson, and I have lived in Chevy Chase since 1981. I believe there are too many unknowns about ZTA 2502 to allow consideration at this time. For one thing, why are there over 30,000 approved housing units already in the pipeline and none are being built? And why would one think adding additional units by the ZTA would expect a different result? Lisa Gavoni, Supervisor of Montgomery Planning, has promised a thorough analysis of the pipeline to better understand project-specific impediments to getting these units built. So, where are the results? Also, do you know how many service workers, teachers, police, and fire there are that need and want homes in Montgomery? How can you set a goal and not have that number? She goes on to say, we should continue to zone for housing that meets demand in places that have the infrastructure to support it. So let's talk about infrastructure. Where is the research for the potential effects of this proposed ZTA on the present infrastructure in areas that are already under stress? You know that some of these neighborhoods were established nearly 100 years ago with infrastructure determined by master plan equally as old. WSSC reported 130 water main breaks this January alone. Many neighborhoods have narrow streets, some without sidewalks. If developers do not provide full on-site parking and are allowed to chain, how will resulting on-street parking affect emergency vehicles getting through? Or how would the quality of life in those neighborhoods be affected? What are your plans to lessen the gridlock already present? Your own research has found that public transportation cannot handle an increase over the 30 million square foot cap currently in place.
Public schools are already above 100% capacity, and we heard at the BCC listening session last year that children are sitting on the floors of school buses on their way to school. And the County Council Office of Legislative Oversight determined that ZTA 2502 will widen disparities in housing by race and ethnicity, will negatively impact racial equity and social justice, and is likely to benefit only developers and landlords. I've been an orthopedic surgeon in this area for over 50 years, and a 2,500-year-old adage known to every doctor is, first, do no harm. Before I would recommend surgery to any patient, I'd ask myself 3 questions. 1, are there alternative options that may be equally good or better? Number 2, what could go wrong so I can anticipate and prevent? And 3, the most important of all, what do I not know? Because being blindsided may lead to disaster for the patient and put my entire career at risk. So before you do any surgery on our neighborhoods with the ZTA, what questions have you asked? Your careers may depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Ms. Gallagher.
Hello, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I'm Susan Gallagher, and I live in Bethesda. I'm in favor of the Housing Now package, but I did want to address the issue of the owner occupancy requirement for ADUs and how that might thwart our effort to create more affordable housing along the corridors, actually anywhere in the county for that matter. The ADU rules say that a basement apartment of any size is considered an ADU, and an apartment in any other part of the building would be considered an ADU if it's smaller than 1,200 square feet. So under the owner occupancy rules, if one of the 2 apartments in a building is considered to be an ADU, the owner of the building has to live in one of the 2 apartments in order to rent the other one out. So owners of homes along the corridors are going to be so excited to hear they can build a duplex and rent out their units. And they'll probably want to take the less expensive option, which is to convert their basement to a walkout apartment or build a small apartment on their house so they can rent out the units. But you're going to have to tell them that if they try to do that, they won't be able to rent out their units because of the requirements of owner occupancy under the ADU. This is a real disincentive for them, and it's going to create a lot less affordable housing than you want. So even if an owner or a builder wants to start from scratch, tear their house down, put in a new duplex, they're going to have to be super careful that one of the units is not considered to be a basement apartment, and they have to be sure that one of the units is no smaller than 1,200 square feet. Otherwise, it won't be considered a fully rentable duplex under Housing Now. So owners might try to get around this by building an addition that's 1 square foot larger than the 1,200 square foot. But why create such an arbitrary distinction in this case? And why incentivize the construction of larger, more expensive housing? So, I'm just trying to argue that it would be really good. By the way, landlords who can't afford to build something cheap and cheerful would be tempted to sell out to a developer who's going to just put expensive luxury duplex or townhouses there. So what I'm trying to argue is the way to avoid this adverse consequence is to clearly spell out in your Housing Now bill that any structure along the corridor that has 2 units, regardless of whether one is in the basement or whether it's smaller or bigger than 1,200 square feet, is considered to be a legally rentable duplex. Unless you do this, you're going to leave a lot of landlords along the corridor confused, very angry and disappointed, and you're going to end up with a lot of luxury duplexes that only the wealthy can afford. So if I have enough time, I guess I don't. Yeah, I was going to say we might as well just go ahead and eliminate the owner occupancy rule all across the county for this very reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ross?
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Ross, and I'm speaking as an individual. I urge you to enact ZTA 2502 and strengthen it. The current draft is a step in the right direction, but it's much too small a step to meet our housing needs. Missing middle housing needs to be legalized by right within the entire red and purple line corridors, extending 1 mile from the stations. I'm going to use most of my time to look at the arguments made by the opponents of missing middle housing. These arguments just aren't coherent. The opponents have told us for years that master plans are sacred. Now they want you to ignore the master plan. They want traffic kept out of residential neighborhoods, but they also want all the neighborhoods to go where there's a lot of traffic. They rail against big developers, but they oppose by right development of small houses, which is the only way small builders can get into the market. They say they want to preserve the county's suburban character, but their policies make all the new housing go into a few small areas full of high-rises. Let me say one more thing about neighborhood character. The character of detached house neighborhoods near transit is being altered right now by mansionization. Mansionization is a consequence of the current zoning code. The code limits new structures to one housing unit per lot, and that means every time an old house is torn down, we get a mansion for rich people. If you really want to preserve neighborhood characters, you need to do two things. One, which is where it's effective in the current zoning ordinance, is to increase the maximum number of units per lot from 1 to at least 3 by right. Second, you would then limit the size of the individual housing units in the replacement structures to something like the size of the old houses, say 2,000 square feet. That way, when a 1,500 square foot house comes down and replaced with a 5,000 square foot structure, the new structure would have 3 units, each similar in size to the old house, and thereby preserve the character of the neighborhood. Because what you need to preserve is not the buildings, it's the age and economic diversity of our detached neighborhoods. You know, this is exactly the point that the town of Somerset made earlier this afternoon. At the same time, with that kind of limit, you would add more new housing units to address our severe shortage. It would be a win-win, giving both sides of this debate what they're asking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to this panel. Our next panel is Carolyn Gupta, Catherine Davies, Richard Hoy, Brit Simintov, Mauricio Vasquez, Brian Anlu, and Sharon Canavan. Yeah, and then to Sharon. We can start off with Ms. Carolyn Gupta when you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Gupta with the Connecticut Avenue States Civic Association. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at this hearing regarding housing. Our community has over 1,000 houses bordering 2 state roads. That's MD 185, Connecticut Avenue, MD 586, Beers Mill Road, and a County Street, Randolph Road. We're also near 2 metro stations, Wheaton and Glenmont. This neighborhood is diverse with residents from over 15 countries. The Civic Association has been active since 1994. Recently, the CAECA has been receiving in the mail information from the county boards of appeals and private surveyors that do not directly affect the neighborhood. Yet, why is it that the Connecticut Avenue states are not getting information by mail on this housing issue, which mentions area and certain corridors, like roads and boulevards that have 3 lanes, which are Connecticut Avenue states bordered on, the Beersman Road and Connecticut Avenue? How can the Civic Association inform the neighbors if information is not provided to the Civic Association? In the neighborhood, there are those who work 2 jobs, are taking care of their families, etc., who do not have the time to sit daily at a computer to see what's happening in their area. You may say that these can be pulled up online or on emails. I want to announce that there are those who are still, like me, who do not have email. I still get most of my information through the USPS, the mail service. It would be beneficial for my civic association to get such information through our county council representatives to inform us. I did learn
a sustainable community. By allowing for more housing along key corridors, this amendment supports smart growth, reduces transit congestion, and helps people live closer to their jobs. This is especially critical for our workforce, including teachers, first responders, and others who deserve to live in the communities they serve. Not acting is the most expensive choice we could make. Without policies that encourage housing development, the affordability crisis will worsen. More people will struggle to find homes, commute times will increase, and the mobility will decline. Beyond affordability, housing development is a powerful economic driver. More construction means more jobs, more local business activity, and increased tax revenue to fund public services. Right now, we're also facing economic uncertainty due to shifts in federal employment policies. Strengthening our housing market will provide economic resilience, attracting new residents, supporting local businesses, and fostering a more dynamic economy. We require policies that attract new businesses, generate employment opportunities, and support our workforce. The county needs to construct an estimated 41,000 homes by 2030. However, a third of its land is designated for single-family homes. In contrast, multifamily homes occupy a small portion of the county's land. Notably, more than half of the county's households reside in townhomes or apartments, and predominantly minority groups make up this population. We have garnered strong support for the More Housing Now package for minority communities, which now collectively comprise over half the county's population. We cannot afford to wait. Housing is not just about buildings, it's about people, families, and the future of Montgomery County. By supporting More Housing Now, we're making a commitment to a more inclusive, economically strong, and sustainable community. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Great. Ms. Anlu, you are next. You have 5 minutes. You're also speaking on Bill 2-25.
Thank you, Madam President. Brian Anlu. I'm wearing multiple hats today, so I hope you'll forgive my somewhat disjointed testimony. First, I'm here on behalf of the Apartment and Office Building Association in support of Council Bill 225. AOBA commends the sponsors for taking the steps to address the county's housing supply issues and the ailing office market. The most recent county economic indicators report shows that the office vacancy rate is approaching 20%. This rate is only going to increase as long-term leases expire and employers continue to reassess their office space needs. The federal government is not helping either. Last week, GSA canceled thousands of commercial leases, millions of square feet of office space, and more are planned by September. As you all know, they also plan to list hundreds of federal properties for sale. If all these cancellations and sales are completed, there will be an even bigger glut of commercial office space on the market, driving office property values down even more. In my written testimony, you'll find a graphic that illustrates the county's current office market. It shows several privately owned office properties declining in values by as much as 30 to 70%. These aren't properties in a suburban office park somewhere. They're right on Metro. AOBA has a member property that lost 70% of its value in Bethesda. So while property tax abatement may seem like a lot to some, I would point out that these properties are already producing diminishing returns for the county. A 2023 report by RCLCO found that every 10% decline in office values results in approximately $14 million less in revenue for the county. For these reasons, AOBA urges the council to pass Council Bill 225. With that, I'd like to put on my individual hat on and also my realtor hat. I'm a lifelong resident of the county, and I'm supporting Zoning Text Amendment 2502 because I've seen firsthand the impact that the housing shortage has on buyers. Last summer, I represented a MCPS teacher client who was hoping to buy her first home for her and her elderly mother and younger sister. Despite putting in several offers at or slightly above the list price, she lost out 3 times on 3 different homes to buyers with more cash on hand who could afford to bid $15,000 to $25,000 above list. And so I strongly support the ZTA. I would simply ask a small change that you reduce the master plan right-of-way width from the greater of 100 feet to at least 80 feet. That would allow me to build multi-unit workforce housing at my childhood home in Silver Spring. It's a 1950s era home that is functionally obsolete. It has small bedrooms, small closets. I guess people had less stuff back then. And so really, without this option, the only thing that I could do with that home right now, it's valued at about $400,000 in the present state that it's in. It's in serious disrepair. The only thing I could do with that home is I could gut it for about $200,000 and list it closer to the market value of $700,000. That's what newly renovated single-family homes are selling for nearby. With this ZTA, if it's expanded slightly, as I said, I'd be able to build up to 3 units on that property, selling at roughly $500,000. Some of the math might change depending on some of the decisions you all make. But with that, that's going to be somewhat more affordable to the client that, as I mentioned, I've represented last year. And we'll be able to keep her here instead of displacing her to Frederick or beyond. And so with that, I urge the council to support more housing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Ms. Canavan.
Good afternoon. I'm Sharon Canavan, President of Northwood Four Corners Civic Association. ZTA 2502 affects 2 corridors alongside our community, University Boulevard and Colesville Road. With little time to respond, we're relying on our community survey responses on the University Boulevard corridor plan. Respondents were open to greater housing density on a less intensive scale. 42% support duplexes and 15% support triplexes. In contrast, 1/3 oppose any higher density. ZTA 2502 limits development to 40 feet. 41% of survey respondents approved heights of no more than 40 feet. A majority support current setbacks. One of the measure's sponsors assured us ZTA 2502 applies to individual lots with setbacks, not assembled parcels of several lots. Developers may prefer by right redevelopment under the corridor plan over the optional method under ZTA 2502, lessening its impact. Along the 3.5-mile University Boulevard corridor, that plan estimates up to 4,000 new residential units, while the more modest scale housing density under ZTA 2502 is half that estimate county-wide. The corridor plan affects too many properties, more than 200 single families out of 1,600 households. The ZTA 2502 map covers a more reasonable 66 homes. ZTA 2502 limits upzoning solely to properties with corridor frontage and is more sensitive to height, setback requirements, and density. Yet the issue of deconfliction arises. Which of these proposals controls the outcome for our neighborhood? Parking is a hot button issue. On-street parking near the corridors already limits passage to a single lane, forcing drivers to the curb to avoid oncoming cars. Adding housing density without requiring parking will produce congested, unnavigable streets. The corridor plan will reduce travel lanes on both our corridors, likely adding to congestion and cut-through traffic. Less traffic capacity while adding housing density is counterintuitive. With so little time to adopt policy, we can't comment on the 15% workforce housing requirement or the AMI standard. Most home values on our 2 corridors range from the mid-400s to 500s. Will more expensive housing replace naturally occurring affordable homes? The University Boulevard corridor plan, and to a lesser extent ZTA 2502, prioritize higher density development without addressing infrastructure limitations, traffic congestions, and parking shortages. Finally, we need much more clarity on issues where the 2 proposals involve different and perhaps conflicting requirements. Thanks for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. That concludes all our in-person testimony for this bill. We now have a number of folks virtual, and we'll start with Dan Wilhelm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Wilhelm, we can hear you.
Good. I'm Dan Wilhelm, President of the Greater Colesville Citizens Association. GCCA supports CTA 2503.
Mr. Wilhelm, actually, if you could, you're very soft.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, you're okay.
See if I can find the volume button.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. You found it.
Anyway, GCCA supports ZTA 2503 to allow commercial to residential conversion in all zones and to provide for expedited approval where the commercial property has been more than 50% vacant for a long period of time. While not addressed in the proposed legislation, transportation impact taxes should not be required since they have already met that requirement when they were first built. In a like manner, the development should not be subject to LITR tests and requirements. GCCA supports Bill 2-25 to establish payment in lieu of taxes for commercial residential conversions. However, the proposed 25-year tax waiver period is too long. Rather, we support a 10-year period. GCCA supports modifications to ZTA 2502. The justification for this program is that people can't afford single-family detached houses, but then the proposal is to build multifamily units, not single-family detached houses. There are many houses throughout the county that sell much less than a $1 million single-family detached house. We think housing for the very wealthy areas should be excluded. For example, typical houses in the eastern part of the county are around $600,000. Also, why not include attached houses when determining median price houses? Based on the previous point, GCCA feels that $148,000 annual income for a couple is much too high to be covered with workforce housing program and thus to be eligible to receive government benefits. County funds should not be used to help people buy houses in wealthy communities like Potomac and Bethesda. GCCA opposes increasing, including controlled major highways, since this category of roads does not have buildings facing them. Also, some segments of the roads identified with the ZTA are actually 1-lane or 2-lane service roads. The ZTA also needs to clearly exclude development on fronting service roads. GCCA agrees with the ZTA that site plan approval is required to give the public an opportunity to comment on the conversions. Space needs to be provided on-site for parking for at least 2 vehicles, since on-site parking is generally not allowed on boulevards and possibly downtown streets. The requirement is needed to preclude residents from multi-family units building parking in adjacent neighborhoods. It should be realized that public transit is poor in some of the areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilhelm. Next, we have Leanne Tobias.
Hi there, how are you? Thanks for the opportunity to testify. I'm Leanne Tobias of the Springfield Civic Association in Bethesda. SCA represents 650 homes and 1,700 residents. SCA appreciates more housing now. It's significantly better than OSSI, but this legislation needs substantial amendment, additional study, and more public input, including the following changes. Prohibit chaining to explicitly eliminate from upzoning all parcels that do not entirely front on corridors, including lots to the rear of corridor fronting parcels, corner lots, and lots that front on side streets. Ensure that single-family neighborhoods are not overwhelmed by on-street parking and traffic increases that cause congestion and reduce emergency response times. Provide 2 parking spaces per unit on site. All vehicle access for upzoned parcels should be directly to and from the corridor, not from neighborhood streets. And the amount of permitted upzoning on a corridor should be linked to mass transit capacity. The corridors that border my neighborhood in Springfield, River Road and Massachusetts Avenue, lack sufficient mass transit for projects larger than a single-family lot. Enact robust environmental controls, including non-disturbance of mature tree canopy, minimum tree canopy standards, and mandatory stormwater management requirements that are non-waivable. In addition, provide for triplex standards for stormwater management. Reject the planning department's recommendations to eliminate site plan reviews or to reduce site plan reviews to administrative reviews by planning staff. Full site plan reviews are needed to tailor projects to community needs and to ensure transparency. Conduct additional studies and revise legislation to address fiscal and Res J issues. Thorough fiscal impact analysis is needed to ensure that infrastructure needed for upzonings and tax abatements for office to multifamily conversions do not unduly strain county resources, especially in light of federal job and budget cuts. NOAA and anti-displacement protection should be enacted to address Res J concerns. And finally, provide more notice, time, and opportunity for public comment. Send written notice to affected homeowners to afford them that they are proposed for upzoning, conduct additional public hearings, and keep the record open for at least 30 days after hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Tobias. Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Sherry Weiss, and she'll be speaking for 5 minutes. She's also speaking on a ZTA 25-03.
Thank you. I am Sherry Steisel Weiss, president of the Lux Manor Citizens Association, representing almost 900 households in Lux Manor, Windermere, and the Oaks. Lux Manor is bounded by Executive Boulevard, Old Georgetown Road, and I-495. In 2021, Hurricane Ida resulted in an extraordinary amount of water falling within our community, and the resulting damage cost to property was in the millions. Had a person or pet been in their basement at the time of the storm, the force of the water entering those homes would have been deadly. As a result of this incident, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is conducting an ongoing hydrologic and hydraulic study, and FEMA is reviewing flood zone maps. 7 properties have been identified along Old Georgetown Road with potential to be workforce housing sites under ZTA 2502. We anticipate several vacant buildings along Executive will be opportunities for conversion to workforce housing under ZTA 2503. We appreciate your responding to our residents' concerns by narrowing the legislative focus to workforce corridors and eliminating by right development. We urge you to continue to require public input through site plan review before the planning board in development decisions. ZTA 2502 is problematic for property owners who currently reside along these 7 proposed properties for additional density development. Climate adaptation standards are not addressed. There are no standards for 3 or 4 unit multiplex buildings. We concur with the planning board recommendations for zone changes, ZTA changes, or other enforceable mechanisms that will require control of stormwater runoff. We also agree that stringent standards are needed to support the CAP. Stormwater management waivers must also be banned. We concur with the Planning Committee recommendations to assess the potential need for code changes, ZTA changes, and other enforceable mechanisms as appropriate for new, more stringent standards regarding stormwater management. Doing so would go a long way in mitigating stormwater quantity, flooding, and water quality negative impacts. Tree canopy regulations must be maintained. Applicants who trigger this law prefer to pay the off-site fee rather than replace the trees they have removed on the site as a result of their development. Reduction of tree canopy provisions as currently outlined in this ZTA are highly problematic for a community that is already flood prone. We agree with the planning board for code changes that would lessen the tree canopy loss. Our neighborhoods has narrow streets dating back to the 1930s. Currently, both Tilden Middle School and Lux Manor Elementary School are located along these streets, resulting in parking challenges and massive traffic backups during and after school hours. We understand the logic in the proposal to reduce the parking spaces from 2 to 1 to assist in stormwater management for impervious surfaces. However, this reduction in parking will only contribute to more parking and traffic congestion on our neighborhood's antiquated streets. Both ZTAs are lacking in provision to address traffic Old Georgetown Road has failed intersections along our community. The newly built Woodward High School is across the street from the proposed blue zone. Recently added bike lanes along Old Georgetown Road have added to the confusion and congestion and have effectively removed a lane of traffic from both sides of Old Georgetown Road. The proposed BRT route, which will effectively take away yet another lane of traffic on Old Georgetown Road, takes away the notion of a 3-lane roadway in front of the proposed workforce housing sites. We are trying to get our minds around how all of this and new curb cuts and additional residents will be able to use Old Georgetown Road for travel. Utility infrastructure issues must be addressed in both proposed ZTAs. WSSC infrastructure is dilapidated and needs to be replaced to support all of this development. Our community has endured multiple pipe failures, and this really needs to be addressed. In recent years, raw sewage pipes that are located along the Old Farm Creek behind Executive Boulevard and Lux Manor Elementary School have leached raw sewage into our creek throughout the community. Both ZTAs must have amendments that proactively address utility infrastructure prior to allowing any additional development to occur. There must be ZTA 2503 amendments to address school utilization and enrollment to require a converted office building to address school capacity when a feeder school in the cluster is at least at 85% capacity. Coordination between MCPS and planning is critical in communities with overcrowded schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mary Kohler.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Kohler, and I'm testifying on behalf of Montgomery Housing Alliance. As the council is well aware, the county must significantly increase housing production to meet housing targets over the next several years. ZTA 2502 is an important first step toward expanding opportunities for more diverse housing typologies along certain county corridors. This is a critical aspect of the blueprint for the county's future set forth in Thrive 2050. A future that fosters communities with better access to jobs, transportation, parks, public spaces, and affordable, attainable housing. To achieve these goals, we must update zoning policies to allow more of the housing we need in more places in Montgomery County. Housing, especially meaningfully affordable housing, remains one of the county's most pervasive and persistent challenges. Nearly half of Montgomery County renter households are housing cost burden, paying over 30% of income toward housing costs. A quarter pay more than half of their incomes toward rent. The county must also work to ensure more equitable access to affordable homeownership opportunities, allowing more households, and especially households of color, to build generational wealth. We applaud ZTA 2502 sponsors for recognizing that among the tools needed to address these complex challenges, we must update land use policies to allow more homes in a variety of types and sizes to be built in more places. We encourage the council to consider expanding the ZTA to amplify its impact by including rail stations in addition to major county corridors and by applying the measure to corner lots on transit corridors. These additions would generate even more homes with access to jobs and economic opportunity. We also encourage the council to ensure that the ZTA reduces barriers to development and helps assure certainty for builders. This critical effort to expand allowable housing types must align with the development industry's expertise so that development is feasible and effective. Additionally, the county must increase assistance for home buyers so they can benefit from updated zoning policies. We strongly support the efforts of the More Housing Now Act co-sponsors to double investment in the down payment assistance program. In addition to the Workforce Housing Fund, this investment must reflect net new money in the county budget. Measures to increase overall housing production, such as ZTA 2502, are important steps to reduce the housing shortage. We urge you to continue to combine them with other tools that address deeper housing need among low-income households, such as prioritizing affordable housing in the county budget, supporting rental assistance, and prioritizing preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. We applaud the council for the hard work you have done and continue to do to address housing need. We welcome any opportunity to work with you further on these issues, and especially on ZTA 2502. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I think we're going to Paul Jarosinski.
Yes, I'm Paul Jarosinski. I represent the Cherrywood Homeowners Association as its president. We're a 606 unit homeowners association in Olney, Maryland. We are a county master plan community that includes single-family detached homes, townhomes, and MPDUs. I am commenting on our opposition to ZTA 2502 as well as Pilot Bill 2-25. Due to time restraints, a few points are only in my written submission. While this new plan is less intrusive than the original AHSI plan, it still starts the AHSI process where the council is redefining and downgrading the meaning of single-family zoning by virtue of ZTA. This plan will replace naturally occurring affordable housing with much smaller market rate housing. It will further decrease the most popular style of living in Montgomery County, further driving up the cost of the detached homes remaining. Instead, you should be building and offering these multiplexes in failed malls, vacated spaces, and new communities where there are 100,000 units already in the planning development pipeline. The current plan is an indiscriminate countywide plan that paints blue boxes on existing streets throughout the county without regard for existing master plans, adjacent communities, and infrastructure, especially with the increased congestion expected from having more cars accessing the county's commuter routes between traffic signals. In specific regard to Cherrywood, you have designated several acre-plus lots adjacent to our community for upzoning. Using your FAR of 1.25, each of these single-house lots could be converted to 50-plus apartment units. Not only would this cause a traffic nightmare on Georgia Avenue, the only north-south corridor in the county, but all the water from that new impervious surface would run downhill into Cherrywood homes. This is poor planning. Cherrywood is also concerned about a developer buying some of the lots in Cherrywood that would likely be flooded. While Councilmember Friedson has said this can't happen, Jason Satorian, a land use attorney, has said there's no language in the ZTA that prevents this chaining from happening. This omission needs to be corrected. Cherrywood was one of the first HOAs to recommend converting near-empty commercial buildings to affordable housing, the only real housing shortage in Montgomery County. Outside the federal layoffs and deportations, this makes sense if it is conformed to the current standards of greater than 50% affordable housing for a 15-year pilot. The current council proposal of only 15% affordable housing for a 25-year pilot is a bad deal for taxpayers. We concur with the RSJ impact statement that this plan could undermine the county's ability to provide future public goods and services, and that this is particularly harmful to BIPAC community members. We do not support the pilot bill for this reason. We understand that a fiscal analysis of this proposal won't even be ready for review until March 18th. With the HSI, no council member could name any HOA with board of directors for that organization endorse the application of AHSI within their community. Similarly, despite the claim that the community was involved with the development of its newest proposal, we could not identify any HOA at the press release, although we could identify representatives of developer groups. Can you name any established community where the governing body has endorsed this plan adjacent to their community? We also question the overall rationale for rushing this plan forward at a time of historic downturn in the economy. The federal, state, and local governments are all over budget. The state of Maryland is projecting a loss of 29,000 federal jobs, and the state fiscal deficit has been up to $3.3 billion. A significant portion of the state deficit will be passed on to the counties. In addition, the federal government is still planning deportations that will further decrease housing demand. All of these changes will likely result in fiscal shortfalls and a downturn in the real estate market. Now is a particularly inopportune time for another gift to developers. We join Mark Elrich and Will Giwando in asking the council to acknowledge the unprecedented current fiscal crisis, to pull these proposals and wait at least 6 months until the dust settles at the federal level. Housing could be tremendously different after the layoffs and deportation. Lastly, we remain concerned about the purposeful misrepresentation of the market rate housing situation in the county by the planning staff and some members of the council as an excuse to attack single-family detached housing. Single-family detached housing is the most popular form of housing for several reasons. It is not racist, as the planning director claims, and either the target on those developments or the planning director needs to be removed. It is purposely deceptive to keep telling county residents that the average cost of a home is over $1 million, insinuate that residents need an income of $340,000 to buy a home. Thousands of homes are sold every year to people making considerably less than $340,000. Median price is a standard real estate term which details the average buyer for a home in the county. According to Rocket.com, a median price for a home in February 25 was $615, down from $650 last summer. Currently, there's a house for sale on River Road for $35 million. When this house sells, it would greatly skew the average price of a home for that month, but not the median, which is why the median is the main price indicator. Let's stop trying to demoralize and mobilize the residents in our area that don't know the difference between the mean and the median when it comes to real estate. Statistics.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have David Foreman, who is also speaking for 5 minutes and also speaking on ZTA 25-03.
I'm David Foreman and live in Bethesda. I represent the Citizens Coordinating Committee on Friendship Heights, a coalition of 18 community organizations in southwest Montgomery County, serving about 20,000 residents. We commend the council on some of the More Housing Now proposals, such as increased funding for workforce housing and the conversion of vacant office buildings to housing. However, the ZTA for upzoning along certain corridors should be withdrawn pending a more detailed assessment of ongoing federal job and spending cuts, the completion of necessary impact studies, and revisions addressing numerous comments and questions from county residents and civic groups, including the coordinating committee. Community organizations of residents affected by the ZTA were not involved in developing this legislation. It appears to have been drafted in coordination with lobbyists and sprung on the public with insufficient time for analysis. Nevertheless, citizens have been able to submit testimony pointing out important unanswered questions, errors in the data on which the proposal relies, and likely unintended consequences. Some of these are outlined in our lengthy written testimony. The hearing today, three or 5 minutes of testimony per speaker, plus a few so-called listening sessions, is inadequate to answer, that is, to actually respond to the questions and solve the problems. Nor is having a busy person, presumably a staff member, read written comments at the last minute when the proposal is set in stone. This is why community involvement in developing legislation is essential. If the community is involved from the beginning when the legislation is being devised, then problems can be identified and solved, assumptions can be researched, impact studies can be performed, and the persons most affected can respond. It is especially inappropriate to pass this legislation now. As you are aware, current actions of the federal government are likely to have drastic effects on Montgomery County's economy, including on its housing situation. The assumptions on which the More Housing Now legislation is based are likely to change. The proposal to build multiplexes on major thoroughfares is severely flawed. Most of the promoted housing will be expensive market rate housing for which this legislation is not needed. It will produce only a small number of workforce housing units while causing disruption and problems for neighboring residents. The problems and questions are so numerous and diverse that a few minor amendments would not fix its problems. Therefore, the legislation for upzoning along specific corridors should be withdrawn, pending a more detailed assessment of ongoing federal job and spending cuts, the completion of necessary impact studies, and revisions addressing numerous comments and questions from county residents and civic groups, including the Citizens Coordinating Committee on Friendship Heights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Catherine Hops, and who is also speaking for 5 minutes and speaking to ZTA 25-03 and Bill 2-25.
My name is Catherine Hops. I live with my family on Green Acres Drive in Silver Spring. I'm testifying to express my opposition to provisions of More Housing Now. We need more affordable housing in Montgomery County, but there are major problems with the proposed zoning text amendments and tax abatement. As a resident of the Hillendale neighborhood since 1997, these are my concerns. Zoning text amendment 2503. We enjoy having retail and services within walking distance of our home. Children have been able to walk to 7-Eleven for snacks and adults to pick up a carton of milk. And we have been able to drive up to drop off our cleaning on our way to the office for years. We enjoy the convenience of having our cars serviced at the Hillendale Shell, walking home while the car is in the shop. These retail establishments are in a strip classified as NR. We don't want to lose walkable retail. We want Hillendale to remain a walkable community for all its residents. Bill 225. It allows a full 25-year property tax abatement for conversion projects if a minimum of 15% moderately priced dwelling units is provided. This provision was not designed to benefit the overall county. The Office of Legislative Oversight has found that Bill 225 would likely benefit landlords and residents who can afford market rate housing more than residents in need of affordable housing and widen housing disparities. Why aren't MPDUs just required as per area master plans? A 25-year property tax abatement is fiscally irresponsible, especially now. With 80,000 federal workers, residents of Montgomery County, 3/4 of whom are facing layoffs, we know belt tightening will be required. One neighbor in our block lost her federal job last week. 2 other neighbors, also in our block, put their house on the market in fear of their employment outlook. Our county cannot afford such an overly generous tax abatement. ZTA 2502 is alarming for many in the Hillendale neighborhood. If ZTA 2502 applies to service roadways, it would negatively impact our neighborhood. New Hampshire Avenue from Rupert to McSeany would become a very congested roadway. This is just 5 blocks from Key Middle School and 6 blocks from Cresthaven Elementary, an area frequented by many children. Thank you for keeping in mind the needs of all your constituents.
Thank you. Next, we have Deborah Kornblath Berger. Ms. Berger, I think you're muted still. Can you hear?
Okay.
I couldn't hear.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm Deborah Kornblath Berger. I'm here as a homeowner who lives in the Oaks and will be directly affected if you allow the buildable area named 0 Old Georgetown Road near the corner of Old Georgetown and Lux in the Oaks community. First, there'll be an issue with the stormwater management. The retaining pond is built to sustain the 30 houses in our community, not more. The infrastructure will be compromised. There could be flooding without the proper drainage. Where would the water from the new homes go? They can't be diverted into the pond. There's no room. Another structural issue will be the structural integrity of the retaining wall. WSSC and the county and the state would all have to work together to find a new location for the water to be drained. This wall is so important to the safety of our community to keep the water flow away from the houses, which one of them is my house. Also, the wall is attached to the state wall. It will have a domino effect. You cannot remove it without damaging the other wall as they're all connected. The gas lines in our community can be affected. Also, everyone in our community pays a yearly fee for the underground utilities that should not be compromised. These private underground utilities are important for our community to exist. Interior retaining walls could be adversely affected with the changing of the grading. The nearby homes could be affected with grading changes, infrastructure issues, the water issues, and the wall issues, which are all significant. These reasons alone should educate people why this is not practical for this narrow piece of land to be built on. Now, as if that weren't enough, there would also be the disruption to the traffic, which the flow on Old Georgetown Road is already crowded. They have already added a bike lane, and there's a dangerous merging traffic area near the highway. The BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit, is slated to remove another lane from Old Georgetown, which will make it a 2-lane road for the traffic. The traffic itself is already a problem, and it may be used as a cut-through. There are problems with the traffic flow and crowding. On this section of Old Georgetown Road, 0 Old Georgetown Road, as they named it, the students from Walter Johnson High School use the sidewalks as their only walking path from the communities, all the communities nearby, Lux Manor, Windermere, and the Oaks. There's no room for the housing with the sidewalk as well. To sum up my testimony, As a homeowner directly impacted by the possibility of this, I need to say it does not seem reasonable. It's not a good idea for this narrow piece of land, which currently has a large brick retaining wall for safety, to be built with the infrastructure problems, the grading issues, the water problem, drainage, the underground utility, the structural integrity of the wall connecting to the state wall. Thank you very much for removing this narrow piece of land with a brick wall attached as a possibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Lori McGillivray.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President Stewart and council members. My name is Lori McGillivray, and I live in Tacoma Park. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments today. And while I support more affordable housing in the county and the provisions for converting vacant office space to housing, the Workforce Housing Opportunity Fund, and increased homeowner assistance program, I believe the proposal needs more thought and refinement to avoid unintended consequences. I'm here today in large part because I learned about the ZTA from a neighbor who was very upset, in fact in tears, to find her home was included on the map. She feels singled out as one of only 4 homes on a frontage road on the Tacoma Park section of New Hampshire Avenue. As a minority low-income single senior, she's deeply worried that the change will increase her property taxes and make it unaffordable for her to stay in her home. This must be avoided. There are precious few places for low-income seniors to live in the county, not to mention the disruption of leaving a long-time home. In Tacoma Park, we're working really hard to keep low-income seniors in their homes. The Village of Tacoma has volunteers like my husband who do small home repairs, and we've helped seniors apply for low-income weatherization and energy efficiency programs, both of which my neighbor has benefited from. There's something wrong if after trying so hard to stay in her home, my neighbor will be forced out because of unaffordable property taxes. Making room for higher income workforce housing and middle income units doesn't seem like the right balance if it means losing existing low income residents. I strongly urge the council to look at how parcels for workforce housing development were identified. It's a real patchwork, especially for parcels with single family homes. Single family homes along busy streets are often some of the more affordably priced houses, and yet the bill provides no protections for existing low-income single-family homeowners. I encourage the council to envision how redevelopment might work given this patchwork. There are areas where only 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 residential lots are included on a stretch of roadway. Despite being part of a subdivision, only the few lots fronting the roadway are included. So it may make sense to look at a different and more equitable configuration. I also wonder how many workforce housing units the ZTA will produce if the minimum is 15% of units or only one of 3 triplex units. And I'm not sure how many units are required in a duplex. So I strongly recommend the council exclude homes occupied by low-income residents and exclude residential areas with less than 5 parcels. Finally, I was surprised and disappointed that affected property owners were not notified directly of the change. So I urge the council to slow down, make sure affected property owners are informed of the ZTA, and ensure that current low-income residents are not affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rebecca Wood.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Rebecca Wood, and I'm a resident of Kent Mill. I've been a resident here for 16 years. I strongly oppose the workforce housing ZTA, not because I don't care about affordability, but because this proposal was pushed forward without input from me, my neighbors, or our local civic associations. That is not how a democratic process should work. I take issue with being painted as someone who doesn't support affordable housing simply because I oppose this flawed plan. I care deeply about responsible development, but this ZTA forces high-density housing into established suburban neighborhoods like Kent Mill without considering the consequences. Our roads are already congested, our schools are over capacity, and our neighborhood was never designed to handle this level of density. What's more frustrating is that we were never asked The council didn't engage the people who live here, and it shows. If they had, they know we support smart housing solutions, ones that consider infrastructure, schools, and real community input, but not a rushed agenda. I urge you to reject this ZTA, listen to the communities it will impact, respect the people who you were elected to serve, and we deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Brenda Freeman.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. My remarks are about the process of creating Thrive and more housing now. Both proposals treat homeowners as spectators. Rather than treating us as prospective partners in the process, we are being treated in ways that cause dissension because you are ignoring the impact of development on our property, our lives, and our communities. In other words, the County Council and Planning Board treat homeowners as expendable. Sure, we can attend meetings and submit testimony. The problem is that nothing we say or do is treated as valid, but used to check the box on public comment. I am not opposed to development, but the one-sided effort to give developers and hedge fund owners what they want comes at the expense of homeowners. In addition, the Council and Planning Board is a closed system. Not only are residents' views excluded, such as the overwhelming support for the People's Council, but our recommendations to the county executive, he is also excluded. So let's talk more about the More Housing Now proposal, whose proponents did not bother to share it with other council members or with the residents. In other words, this is a side deal that appears to be in a balkanized council. This is not representative government. The voters elected you to govern on our behalf, so representation should extend beyond paid lobbyists and others who work on behalf of the real estate industry. Because in Thrive and MHN, the emphasis is on rentals rather than moderately placed occupied owner dwellings, the apartments are money makers for developers that are then subsidized by homeowners. Time does not permit me to talk about the increase in taxes and the fact that the council could have given property owners and prospective buyers a break by having developers pay construction costs rather than treating homeowners as a piggy bank for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Elena Stein.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ilana Stein, and I am speaking as a long-term resident of Kent Mill. It's where I was raised and where I'm currently living with my husband and raising our children. And I strongly oppose the proposed workforce housing zoning text amendment. But ZTA threatens the safety, security, and character of our existing community. The increased density that this amendment proposes will bring higher traffic congestion, more parking challenges, and greater demands on already overburdened community resources, such as emergency services and schools, and roads that are already congested with traffic. I'm specifically thinking about the number of times I have turned onto Arcola from University Boulevard only to come to a standstill because of the traffic. I don't understand how we could possibly be considering adding thousands of residents just blocks nearby. I appreciate the need for additional affordable housing in our community. However, rather than forcing high-density housing into or immediately adjacent to residential neighborhoods like Kent Mill, the county should look to commercial areas that already have the infrastructure to support an increase in population. Encouraging responsible development in these areas would be a much more effective way to address housing needs without disrupting well-established suburban communities. Drastic changes to zoning and density risk eroding the character of our neighborhood, creating instability rather than strengthening our community. This plan prioritizes a top-down vision over the needs of our community. Many residents, as you've heard today, many residents and business owners feel unheard, and the plan fails to reflect a balanced approach that considers all stakeholders. Thank you so much for your time and for the opportunity to testify today.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Cherie Branson.
Good afternoon. My name is Cherie Branson.
I am the second vice president for the Montgomery County branch of the NAACP, and I'm here to testify on its behalf. The NAACP has always stood for economic fairness, social justice, and meaningful housing opportunities. In reviewing the target areas proposed to be affected by the ZTA, we believe that some of the county's most racially, ethnically, and economically diverse neighborhoods will be adversely affected. Therefore, we cannot support this ZTA. Not only do we believe that this proposed ZTA sets a dangerous precedent of using zoning laws to undermine single-family neighborhoods, but we also believe that this ZTA will not likely significantly increase the amount of desperately needed affordable housing. Although the ZTA mentions mentions workforce housing, we note that it does not embrace the workforce housing policy goals expressed by the Montgomery County Department of Housing and Community Affairs, which include an increase in availability of housing for county public employees and other workers who cannot support the high cost of housing, assist county employers in reducing critical labor shortages of skilled and semi-skilled workers by providing housing, and reducing traffic congestion to shorten commute time. This DTA is not likely to accomplish any of those goals in a sufficient volume to provide a meaningful number of housing opportunities for county residents. By increasing the density, we note that what is likely to happen is the potential demolition of existing single-family homes in those very neighborhoods. In exchange for this increased density in single-family neighborhoods, the ZTA would require the developers to set aside 15% of their dwelling units for workforce housing without substantially increasing the share above 15%. This ZTA will not achieve its purpose and will actually exacerbate the existing affordable housing shortage by eliminating existing housing, triggering gentrification, and thereby displacing current residents. The OLO has noted that if redevelopment makes affordable communities attractive to higher wealth households, residents in those communities, especially renters, could be displaced as housing costs rise from an influx of wealthier households moving into redeveloping communities. We cannot support this CTA because we believe that it will not create any meaningful affordable housing opportunities, and it will have a devastating impact on our current residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next we have Alicia Simkovich.
That's right. Yep.
All right, you can go. Thank you.
Yeah. My name is Alicia Simkovich, and I'm the father of two in Kent Mill. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak today, and thank you to everyone else here who testified today. I'm going to keep this comment pretty short because unlike someone who publicly assumed earlier that we all have time for meetings, even Zoom meetings on Tuesday afternoons are complicated for everyone here. The thing is, this seems to be the only way we can express how we feel. And with that in mind, I'm testifying in opposition to the plan. As been expressed again and again today, there were no surveys or efforts made outside of this meeting to gather input with those impacted by these plans. Democracy in action matters. Hearing from those impacted is important. And how can the residents impacted not be asked about these plans? As the vast majority of speakers expressed today, I have deep concerns about the plan overall, beyond the traffic concerns and everything else that people mentioned. But who is this actually helping? Is it developers or us, the residents? And during an economic downturn, when people are leaving, federal layoffs, the time is not now for a plan like this. Again, I'm shocked by the lack of research and input from residents who will be most impacted by this plan. Yeah, thank you for your time and thank you for making this open session.
Thank you. Next, we have Tim Vogel.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Great.
Yes.
Tim Vogel, and I'm a homeowner, 30-year resident of Bethesda. I live in Kenwood Park, and it's a neighborhood of about 600 households, and I'm a member of the Kenwood Park Community Association Task Force on these ZTA proposals. I'm not against the policy goals here, but I'm completely against the current process that was followed. You've heard that time and time again today. It was not transparent, following on the heels of the attainable housing strategy fiasco, where there's so much input collected by the council from residents to turn around and just drop something like this 117-page legal text red line of the zoning code on residents without, again, any input, any collaborative process is unacceptable. I would ask that you pause the process, take it off the table. Let's explain the goals in plain language. Let's link them explicitly to the changes that are in the proposed zoning text amendment and address all the concerns that have been raised around the size of these buildings, the safety of these buildings, the impact of these buildings, the infrastructure to support them. One big thing that hasn't been addressed is how you're going to ensure that these buildings are actually workforce priced. There's nothing in the zoning text amendment 2502 itself that addresses the pricing, the sale or resale of these homes. As best I can figure out, there's a cross-reference to Chapter 25B, which is a different section of the zoning code. It's not reflected in any of your changes. That's a very convoluted and cumbersome process. In order to be eligible to buy a home, you've got to pass certain income and other requirements. If you're a workforce member of the workforce, you're only allowed to buy homes based on the size of your existing household, not for future growth. There's 20-year price controls on the prices at which the homes are sold, prices at which they can be resold. The county has obligations for monitoring. The developers have obligations for reporting. There's enforcement mechanisms. The county has a right of first refusal if you want to resell your house at a later date. The amount of money you could make on a resale is capped at something like 15% of the appreciation over that time period. I mean, the provisions under Chapter 25B for rent and price controls of the workforce housing, there's been no discussion of that whatsoever. And if it's not your intent to utilize those procedures and those mechanisms, then there's nothing else in place to make sure that any of this housing is priced for the workforce. So I really feel that's one thing I think was completely missing from zoning text amendment 2502, completely missing from the debate today, which is exactly what are the mechanisms going to be to enforce and ensure that these homes are priced so that the workforce can afford them. We really need a lot more discussion on that. And so I would encourage you to just pause this whole thing, engage a community, and let's try to move forward together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For this ZTA, those are all the public comments we have. This public hearing is now closed. We will now move on to item 5 as a public hearing on zoning text amendment 25-03, expedited approvals, commercial to residential reconstruction. This ZTA would create a commercial to residential reconstruction use, provide an expedited approval process for that use, and allow reallocation of the FAR in certain employment zones. A Planning, Housing, Parks Committee work session is scheduled for March 24th, 2025. Those wishing to submit material for the council's consideration should do so by close of business on March 24th, 2025, and the council will continue to accept correspondence after this date. As a reminder of our public hearing testimony guidelines, your comments must be limited to issues relevant to public hearing topic for which you are testifying and are appropriate for a public meeting. You will hear a tone when your time is up, and we appreciate everyone abiding by their allotted time. Our first group is Jennifer Martin, Lawrence Smith, Tendai Ushi, Lucy Friedman, Weston Henry. And Ms. Martin, we'll start with you as soon as you're at your place.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Martin, President of Historic Tacoma. Speaking in support of the proposed workforce housing zoning text amendment related to conversion of commercial properties. Historic Tacoma's mission is to preserve the heritage of Tacoma Park and to improve the livability of our community. We have many educational programs, activities, research, and archival work, and we engage in educating the public about the value of historic preservation, promoting public policies that foster preservation of historic resources, preserving the architecture and physical environment of the Tacoma community, and working with the greater community to revitalize business areas. We help Tacoma Park continue to be a welcoming, vibrant, and livable city that honors our history and celebrates our diversity. More workforce housing is certainly needed throughout the county. We strongly support converting underutilized commercial space on major thoroughfares for this purpose. The proposal marks a significant improvement over the initial attainable housing plan, which presented serious risk of harm to established single-family neighborhoods, especially those designated as historic districts. Council members Friedson and Fanny Gonzalez are to be congratulated for their response to residents' concerns. Adaptive reuse of commercial space enables us to minimize the impact of development on the environment, avoid resident displacement, and maintain the architectural character of existing neighborhoods. Such conversions are expensive, and this proposal wisely provides financial incentives and expedited review as encouragement. By focusing attention on areas with road capacity, this plan considers some infrastructure needs. Historic Tacoma is particularly pleased that the New Hampshire corridor in Tacoma Park, an area that we and our city leaders have been seeking to improve, has been identified as a target area for new affordable housing. We have several requests of the council as you move forward. First, as others have said, the plan must ensure that any new development is compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. Scale of new buildings should accommodate the size and placement of existing neighboring homes. For example, while multi-story townhomes generally can fit comfortably next to detached smaller houses, massive apartments do not. Second, we urge you to give residents directly affected by any new development opportunities to help shape those plans. It appears that the Development Review Committee will be the initial reviewing body. This committee should be required to notify the affected residential property owners that there is a development application, when the time is scheduled for the review, and an invitation to comment. Residents must have a say in the future of their communities. We do believe with careful attention to details, this text amendment proposal can provide improve the livability of our county and make it a welcoming and affordable home for future residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lawrence Smith.
Yes, my name is Lawrence Smith. I'm supportive of the legislation. I'm an owner of a historical building in Durwood. Right now, we've had many problems trying to get the rezoning of the project done. I was told by the Park and Planning to wait for the Shady Grove Master Plan, which we did. They did a tweak to it, but it was not enough to make the project viable and financially. So we waited again for the next update of the master plan, which is now more viable for the project to move forward. But we still have problems with the financing because most lenders will not lend money they'll only lend money to purchase or if you have building permits. But in the sweet spot between the zoning, where you have the site plan, the preliminary plan, the sketch plan, all that kind of stuff, nobody wants to touch it because it's so toxic, basically, because nobody knows what's going to happen at the end of the process. So with this new process that you were trying to put in place would definitely help the project. We still have plans that we have to have approved by Park and Planning, all that kind of stuff. So it's not a give me or anything like that. But rather than a year process, maybe that can get down to 6 months or so and then get the project moving. The project's been vacant for probably 40 years, and it's been sitting there for various reasons. Also, Montgomery County Code Enforcement is on the project because it's a vacant building. That's another problem you have with vacant buildings. They want the Montgomery County Code Enforcement want the buildings upkeep. They want them livable, basically, but no owner is going to do that if there's no plans going forward. And the properties get locked up on this roll of everything going on. One last thing I'd like to say is I've sitting here for a couple hours now trying to do it, and I appreciate everything that you have a hard decision ahead of you. But I always look back, I've done real estate for a little while, but I always look back, 100 years ago, all these people here that are against the project, if 100 years ago you had all the farmers here, none of the farmers would let any of these people live here in Montgomery County. because they had to give up all their land. They had to have the roads increased. Like Rockville Pike used to be a 2-lane road. It's now 6-lane, probably on the plans for more of a 12-lane road eventually. But you have to do something, and I applaud you for doing something. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Tendai Ushi.
Good afternoon. My name is Tendai Ushi, and I'm from Harvest Intercontinental Church in Olney. I'm a member of AIM, and I'm here today to testify as an individual in support of the More Housing Now bill. I would like to start by thanking council members Gonzalez, Fritzen, and many others for co-sponsoring this bill. And I'm really here to talk on behalf of people in my church, Sammy, Grace, Fatima, who has not been invited to come and testify, but they all live in Montgomery County and continue to talk about their struggles of not being able to save enough money year after year to purchase a home. The More Housing Now bill is particularly good for Sammy, Fatima, and Grace at my church because they are young professionals. They are younger professionals, and this bill focuses on smaller workforce housing along the transit corridors. In addition, I think this bill has a potential to encourage younger, skilled and professionals to remain in Maryland and contribute to the economy. I've sat here for about 3-4 hours, and we've had a lot of debates about people who feel that this bill would change the current environment. I tend to agree that 10, 15 years ago, the people that are against it were probably in the same situation as Fatima, Sammy, and Grace. And somebody had to make concessions for them to be able to buy their first home in Montgomery County. So I still support this bill. It may need work, as we have heard from the different people, but I support it. I think we have to start somewhere. I also wanted to advocate for home ownership assistance programs to prioritize people from marginalized communities because the housing discrimination has been perhaps the largest contributor to the gap in generational wealth generation. So I thank you for the opportunity to support, to testify. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Lucy Freeman.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lucy Freeman, and I live in the town of Somerset, and I'm here with AIM in support of More Housing Now. When I moved to Somerset in 1975, it was a neighborhood of federal workers, psychiatrists who weren't well paid, social workers, journalists, teachers. This is no longer true. The house behind me and the house across the street from me, both small houses, have been bought by developers who are planning to build 5- and 6-bedroom houses, which will sell for $3 or $4 million and maybe more. And maybe they won't sell. But I would so much prefer to have a duplex or a triplex behind me and across the street from me with workforce housing. For many years, I worked for the Montgomery County Public Libraries, Bethesda, Twin Brook, Aspen Hill, Long Branch, Chevy Chase, and Poolsville. I knew librarians living far out who had these long commutes to try to get to work at the library. Now this is even truer. Picture driving from Olney to the Little Falls Library, which is on Massachusetts Avenue, in the traffic. That librarian I know has now retired, too much driving. Now this, where do the staff at Little Falls Library, the teachers at Westland Middle School, the staff at the firehouse at Wisconsin and Bradley, where do they live? When West Bard was up for development, there was a proposal to build a new library at the Little Falls Library with affordable housing above it. The same plan has been proposed for the Chevy Chase Library and housing at the Bradley, Wisconsin Firehouse. We need housing for jobs, and residents inside the Beltway need services, teachers, library staff, fire, police. It's time for the council to approve affordable and attainable housing, more housing. Now, for more workers, more income to come into the county, and more young adults and people in their 20s and 30s and 40s being able to have a home. So I ask you to please approve more housing now. And I wanted to add, as a retired librarian, I am strongly supporting building affordable housing over libraries. This didn't work before at Little Falls. Maybe someday it will. It's up before Chevy Chase. Can you imagine how nice it would be to walk into a library, pick out a book or a video, and then go up in an elevator to your apartment? Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Next, we have Weston Henry.
Good afternoon. My name is Weston Henry. I am former property manager. I'm also studying urban planning at Georgetown University. I will be late for class today. I would like to address concerns about traffic and resident market stability. In order to do so, I need to quickly touch on the county's demographics. The county's total population has remained remarkably consistent since 2021, with less than a 700-person gap between our high and low in that period. We haven't seen year-over-year population growth greater than 1.5 since 2015. However, that does not mean that our current population looks the same as it did in 2015. Over the last decade, the population over the age of 65 has increased by 20%, while the total number of residents aged 0 to 19, 20 to 34, and 35 to 54 have all decreased, not only as a percentage of the population, but by total numbers. In other words, more families and prime age workers are leaving the county than are moving in. Side note, this is why school enrollment declined for this academic school year. Over 16% of our population is over the age of 65. AARP studies have shown that on average, Americans decide to quit driving at the age of 75. Clinical studies have shown that most seniors overestimate their driving skills, making it hard to see the warning signs that they should start planning for a life without driving. Studies have also shown that most seniors quit driving due to an unforeseen medical event or accident that forces them to admit they can no longer drive safely. We will see a significant reduction in the number of cars on our roads, but the people that are about to quit driving likely don't know this yet, so they are unlikely to advocate for policies that make mobility without a car possible. Since 2015, the county has lost somewhere between 8,000 and 15,000 of its working age population, depending on if you define working age starting at 16, 18, or 20, and whether you think retirement age starts at 55 or 65. Much of this workforce has moved to Frederick County, which has increased its population by about 39,000 since 2015, a 16% increase. Many of these residents would love to reduce their commute times by moving to Montgomery County. Unless we build more housing, these people will be directly competing with our federal workers for housing. Assuming we tore down a single-family house on every one of the roughly 24,000 parcels and replaced it with a 2/2, the overall stock of single-family housing would increase by 4%. The average household size in this county is 2.7 people. That means the best-case scenario is that 19,500 people, residents from Frederick, could have their housing needs met by missing middle housing. That still leaves another 19,500 of those 39,000 Frederick residents eager to move closer to work, which is why we also need an aggressive office to residential policy to ensure these Frederick workers move to new housing rather than displacing our federal workers. Thank you.
Thank you, and hopefully you'll get to class soon.
Thank you.
All right. Great. All right, those are all the in-person folks we have for this panel. We have two people who are on Zoom with us. The first is Stacy Silber.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Stacy Silver with the law firm of Lurch, Early & Brewer, and I'm here today on behalf of NAIOP DC Maryland. As a member of NAIOP's Board of Directors and chair of its Leadership Committee, I'm writing to express NAIOP's strong support for the More Housing Now package of legislation. NAIOP represents hundreds of companies that have been involved in creating the most innovative, sustainable mixed-use developments in Montgomery County and the region. Our members have the breadth of experience of working in multiple jurisdictions. The More Housing Now family of legislation sends a strong message to the community, housing providers, and the equally important financial institutional market that the County Council understands the need for creative solutions to attract investment to the county. The proposals are limited in scope, practical, and the pilot will serve as the catalyst for attracting much needed capital, essential to getting individual housing communities built in Montgomery County. We commend the council sponsors for their leadership in this effort. We have a few suggested changes. We suggest that ZTA 25-03 and Pilot Bill 2-25 also apply to one-story retail where such property is located within a half-mile of metro stations. Encouraging redevelopment of vacant one-story retail near metro presents significant opportunities for redevelopment and furthers the county goals of encouraging higher residential densities near transit. We also suggest that the ZTA and Pilot apply to vacant hotels to encourage revitalization and housing production on these dark commercial sites. In addition, currently the Pilot Bill requires all projects to go through the expedited approval process at Park and Planning. Inadvertently, this results in a slowdown and duplication of efforts for those projects that have previously received planning board approval or are legacy protected. As such, we suggest that this type of project be able to submit to DPS evidence of pilot compliance. We commend the council on thinking creatively and introducing legislation that concretely will make a difference. While more can be done, the Housing Now family of legislation demonstrates the council's commitment to encouraging investment and economic development in the county. We ask that the council support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Stu Simon.
Hi, I'm Stu Simon. I've lived in Montgomery County for 32 years and raised my family here. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Montgomery County Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions, MCFACS. We're comprised of representatives from 60 faith communities across the county. Thank you, Council Members Friedson and Fanny Gonzalez, for developing the More Housing Now package. We strongly support this housing package. Well, I'm not sure if you can see my video. Well, I don't know. Okay.
We can still hear you, Mr.
Okay.
Simon.
But we prefer strengthening it further as specified in Montgomery for all written testimony. When okay, where's the video? Start video. Okay. When I moved to a condo complex 8 years ago near downtown Bethesda, we were able to become a one-car, two-bike family using much less energy and emitting far fewer greenhouse gas emissions. Over the past 6 years, on my half-mile walk to downtown Bethesda, I've watched the majority of inexpensive cottages along Leland Avenue get torn down and replaced by McMansions because the street is single-family only zoning. This has to change. Amending land use policy is critical to meeting the county and state's targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the form of vehicle emissions and home heating and cooling. Providing much more multifamily housing near transit stations and commercial areas allows people to be unleashed from their dependence on cars in favor of healthier, happier, walkable, and bikeable communities. Multifamily housing inherently reduces energy use by 30% or more as the energy lost from one unit goes into the neighboring unit instead of lost into the air. And the more places that become available for multifamily housing, the lower the cost to develop those areas due to decreased developer competition for otherwise scarce lots. Facilitating conversion of commercial buildings to multifamily housing is a creative shortcut, and I commend the legislators for that. We need to design a better future. We need to do it now. In addition to helping provide more affordable housing for our children and our current county workforce, we need to be prepared to take in climate refugees. Due to increased fires, floods, heat, and water shortages, in the coming decades, it's estimated that 10 to 15 million Americans from around the country will be forced to leave their homes in search of more livable housing. We need to think to the future. Without more affordable multifamily housing around transit and commercial areas, people will continue to be forced to move to new, distant, car-dependent developments built on newly raised forests. The last thing we want. Currently, there are numerous single-family only zoning blocks within 1 mile of current and future transit stations. We all of us spend hundreds of millions of dollars on transit systems, but then zone much of the area around them as single family only housing. This is unconscionable. Let's support more housing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are all the folks we had signed up for that public hearing. This public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 6, we have a public hearing on subdivision regulations amendments, 25-01, administrative subdivision expedited approval plan. This SRA would create an administrative subdivision process for a commercial to residential reconstruction expedited approval plan. A Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee work session is scheduled for March 24th, 2025. Those wishing to submit material for the Council's consideration should do so by the close of business on March 24th, 2025, and the Council will continue to accept correspondence after this date. As a reminder of our public hearing testimony guidelines, your comments must be limited to issues relevant to public hearing topics for which you are testifying and are appropriate for a public meeting. You will hear a tone when your time is up, and we appreciate everyone abiding by their allotted time. We have one speaker who is virtual for this public hearing. It's Catherine Denby.
Hello, my name is Catherine Denby, and I'm going to speak to this and also to 25-01 and 02, but I was put in this category. I'm here to oppose the More Housing Now package. While we all share the goal of ensuring a vibrant and sustainable Montgomery County, this proposal is deeply flawed, both in its substance and more specifically in its process. It prioritizes the interests of real estate developers over those of existing residents, disregards infrastructure limitations, and threatens to irreversibly alter the character of our neighborhoods without meaningful community input. First, this plan discards the principles of careful community-driven planning that have long guided Montgomery County's development. Traditionally, master plans are created with robust input from residents, ensuring that growth is balanced, strategic, and aligned with local needs. Instead, More Housing Now bypasses this established process in favor of an arbitrary upzoning scheme that lacks clear boundaries and disregards neighborhood planning efforts. As written, it retroactively changes the zoning for homeowners who made significant investments based on existing regulations, effectively rewriting the rules after the fact. This is a breach of trust. Second, this plan does not solve the affordability crisis, it exacerbates it. This proposal is marketed as a solution for workforce housing, yet it is riddled with loopholes that allow developers to maximize profits without delivering meaningful affordability. Duplexes and many new housing types will have no affordability requirements at all, and even for larger projects, the minimum standard of 15% workforce housing is woefully inadequate, particularly when compared to state proposals requiring 30% or more. Worse, this plan risks fueling gentrification and displacement, replacing existing naturally affordable homes with new market rate units that will be priced far beyond the reach of many current residents. Third, Montgomery County's infrastructure is already under strain, and this plan will make it worse. Our roads, schools, and emergency services were designed for current density levels, not for a sudden influx of multi-unit dwellings on formerly single-family lots. The lack of clear infrastructure planning means that taxpayers will inevitably bear the financial burden of expanded services, increased traffic, congestion, and environmental impacts like stormwater runoff and tree loss. Simply upzoning neighborhoods does not create infrastructure, it only creates chaos. Finally, this is yet another giveaway to developers at taxpayers' expense. The payment in lieu of taxes provision could cost Montgomery County millions in lost revenue, further straining our budget at a time when the state is facing a fiscal crisis and significant federal job losses are expected in our region. Why should we grant 25 years of tax breaks to developers who are only required to provide the bare minimum in affordable housing? Who benefits from this plan? Developers and their investors. Who loses? The residents. I urge you to reject this poorly conceived plan. Instead, the council should work with communities to craft policies that truly address affordability while respecting the principles of smart, sustainable development. We need a strategy that balances growth with infrastructure capacity, ensures affordability for those who truly need it, and preserves the character and livability of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for multitasking as well. Ms. Denby, thank you. That is it for this public hearing. This public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 7 is a public hearing on expedited bill 2-25, taxation payments in lieu of taxes, affordable housing amendments. This bill would establish a minimum payment in lieu of taxes for certain conversions of high vacancy commercial properties to residential use, establish the amount of the payment in lieu of taxes, and generally amend the law governing payments in lieu of taxes. A joint Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee and Economic Development Committee work session is scheduled for March 27th, 2025. Those wishing to submit material for the Council's consideration should do so by the close of business on March 24th, 2025, and the Council will continue to accept correspondence after this date. As a reminder of public hearing testimony guidelines, your comments must be limited to issues relevant to the public hearing topic for which you are testifying and are appropriate for a public meeting. You will hear a tone when your time is up, and we appreciate everyone abiding by their allotted time. Our speakers we have in person today, we have Abe Schuckman, Alan Davis, Patricia Harris, Vince Bias, and Telma and Lisa Blackwell Brown. Mr. Schuckman, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon, Council President Stewart and members of the County Council. Thank you for the opportunity to submit this testimony. My name is Abe Schuckman. I'm the CEO of Housing Unlimited. We provide permanent affordable housing for very low-income adults in mental health recovery. We've been at it for 31 years. But first, on a personal note, I grew up in Montgomery County. I'm a Churchill High School graduate. My wife and I have raised two boys, twin boys. We've lived near the Caulfield Community Center, and we're very proud of the fact that I believe that area is representative of the goals of this package. In other words, we're a wonderful, vibrant community of market rate, single-family housing, townhomes, and we also have affordable apartments, and we all abut the Rosemary Hills Littonsville Park. So I think, just on a personal note, I think there's a very significant subset of Montgomery County that cares deeply about a vision of economic and racial integration, and we're making it happen over in Silver Spring by the Caulfield Community Center. On a professional note, at Housing Unlimited, we serve people below 15% of AMI, so we know about the difficulties of creating affordable housing. Over these 30 years, we've purchased 92 scattered site homes and serve over 250 people. We have 200 people on our waiting list, and so I'm keenly aware of the need for additional affordable housing in the county. So I want to first strongly applaud the MHN package's commitment to expanding pathways to affordable home ownership, including the doubling of the home ownership assistance program from 4 million to 8 million. The need for affordable housing, for affordable home ownership is great. And I just want to say we're so fortunate to have Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland as a community partner, an invaluable partner. I will say that to round out the package, I respectfully request the council to consider one additional element to be added to the package, and that's for our hardworking renters. Some months ago, the County Council unanimously approved, it was really wonderful, a supplement to the rental assistance program. And I can't tell you how much I appreciated that, and our tenants appreciated that, and we'd love for you to extend that into FY26.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Alan Davis. Nope, we don't have Alan Davis. Okay. Next, we have Patricia Harris.
Good afternoon. Pat Harris with Lurch-Early and Brewer here on behalf of URW, the owners of the Westfield Montgomery Mall, to express our very strong support for Bill 225 and our appreciation to the lead sponsors, Council members Fanny Gonzalez and Friedson, and the co-sponsors for initiating this bold, meaningful, and most importantly, needed legislation. The development history of the Montgomery Mall highlights the importance of the bill. Back in 2018, URW recognized the challenges facing regional malls and commenced efforts to introduce multifamily residential as well as additional retail to the mall to create a truly mixed environment and to enhance the site's overall vibrancy. In 2020, URW obtained preliminary plan and site plan approval for 779 residential units, including 117 MPDUs. The vast majority of these residential units, 715, were located on the vacated Sears store parcel where there was once a thriving two-story, nearly 200,000 square foot Sears building. For a variety of reasons, but primarily because of the economic challenges confronting multifamily residential construction, the development never occurred. These economic challenges included construction costs, supply chain issues, labor shortages, and an anemic equity market. Meanwhile, a large vacant department store stood empty. As a result of the pandemic, the retail market has permanently changed. For Westfield Montgomery, this means that the current retail GLA is more than adequate to continue to reinvent the retail experience, and that any additional retail space must be done judiciously and targeted. URW will be seeking a modification of its approvals to decrease the amount of additional retail and to add 129 units, including 20 additional MPDUs, with the hope that at some point this project will be economically viable. Unfortunately, however, the challenges that the multifamily construction industry has faced for the last 4 years not only exist, they are now worse. The current chaos in the market due to tariffs and political instability has only amplified the uncertainty of the interest rates, available labor, and material costs. I cannot overstate how difficult it is for a multifamily development project to pencil out right now, given the current economic and political climate. Bill 225 will make the difference in whether certain projects end up moving forward and delivering needed residential units. The bill encourages the construction of needed housing, including MPDUs at less than the current MPDU rental rate, and results in higher property values for properties that may have otherwise not redeveloped, thus providing a higher tax share for the county upon the expiration of the pilot. If the County Council is serious about delivering needed housing and affordable units, we strongly urge your support. Thank you.
Next, we have Vince Bias.
Good afternoon, Council President Stewart and Council members. I'm Vince Biazzi with the law firm of Lurch, Early & Brewer on behalf of a number of clients with interest in Bill 225. I'm here this afternoon to express our strong support for the bill and to recommend several important revisions for your consideration. Bill 225 is an important piece of legislation that will make a critical difference in whether certain residential projects, particularly multifamily projects, pencil out and actually proceed to construction. As you know, for the past 5 years, the industry has confronted labor and supply shortages, increasing material costs, and a lack of available equity for financing. These factors have caused many to put their projects on hold. Unfortunately, this economic uncertainty has only worsened. A reprieve from property taxes for 25 years will change the bottom line of many pro formas and could prove to be the difference between a project being put on ice or moving forward. Thus, we applaud your efforts to help ensure that needed housing in the county will be constructed. Our recommended revisions to the bill for your consideration are as follows. First, the bill applies to vacant commercial buildings, but the companion legislation, ZTA 2503, restricts commercial to retail or office. We recommend that the pilot apply to any non-residential building. There is no reason that residential development should not be encouraged on the site of a vacant hotel or health club any more than on the site of a vacant office building or retail building. Second, the bill should not require that a property be vacant at the time of application for the entitlement if the project is not availing itself of the expedited review provided by ZTA 2503. Generally speaking, most entitlement processes take approximately 2 years, and no public policy is served by having buildings sit vacant during this period. An owner who has determined that his or her site is no longer viable for non-residential use will strategically time their pursuit of entitlements to coincide with the anticipated vacancies. We recommend that the vacancy requirement apply at the time an owner makes an application for the pilot. Third, for purposes of clarity, we recommend the addition of language providing that the pilot applies to any residential project where the qualifying vacant commercial property is part of a larger assemblage. Finally, there needs to be a mechanism by which projects relying on the pilot are assured that the pilot program will remain valid, comparable to Section 52-24AG regarding the sunset provisions provided for the WMATA pilot program. We appreciate your consideration of these recommendations, and we will submit in writing a more detailed discussion of our proposed recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Biasi. Next, I had Ann Telma. Just making sure. Nope. Okay. Lisa Blackwell-Brown, you are up.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Council President Stewart, Council Vice President Jawando, and members of the Montgomery County Council. My name is Lisa Blackwell-Brown. I'm Secretary Treasurer for UFCW Local 1994 McGeo. I am here today to testify in opposition to Expedited Bill 2-25. While we appreciate the Council's efforts to address the urgent need for affordable housing, Expedited Bill 2-25 unfortunately does not meet the needs of our community. First, by exempting 100% of the real property tax for 25 years, this bill would deprive Montgomery County of a significant source of revenue. Property taxes are a critical funding stream for essential public services, including but not limited to schools, public safety, infrastructure, maintenance, and community programs. The long-term loss of this revenue would inevitably strain the county's resources and could lead to service reductions or increased taxes elsewhere to make up for the shortfall. Secondly, the bill sets the affordability requirement at only 15% of units as affordable to households earning 60% or less of the area's median income. This is about 85% market rate housing. This threshold is too low to meaningfully address the housing crisis in Montgomery County, where the need for truly affordable housing, particularly for low and moderate income families, far exceeds the proposed targets. Moreover, we already have moderately priced dwelling unit requirements in this county. Additionally, the bill lacks sufficient mechanisms to ensure that developers comply with the affordability requirements. Over the long term, without robust enforcement and oversight, there is a real risk that property owners could fail to meet the affordability standards while continuing to benefit from the tax exemption. Furthermore, the bill does not require owners to demonstrate a significant public benefit beyond meeting the minimum affordability threshold. Also, the lack of a fiscal impact statement is concerning and telling. Lastly, McGeo is aware of the OLO report, concluding that this bill could have a negative impact on the racial equity and social justice in that converting high vacancy commercial properties into residential developments has the potential to accelerate gentrification and displacement in vulnerable communities. Without stronger protections for existing residents and more inclusive affordability requirements, this bill could exacerbate economic inequality rather than alleviate it. We urge the Council to oppose, better yet, withdraw Expedited Bill 2-25 and in its place, explore alternative approaches that balance affordable housing with the imperative to protect public revenue and maintain strong affordability requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. That are all the folks we have signed up. Thank you for sharing your feedback on this item. This public hearing is now closed. Now moving on to item 8 is a public hearing on a resolution to approve supplemental appropriation 25-33 to the fiscal year 2025 operating budget, Montgomery County Government, Department of Health and Human Services, State Opioid Response for grant $1,299,883. The source of funds is a state grant. Council action is tentatively scheduled for March 18th on 2025. Those wishing to submit material for council's consideration should do so by the close of business today, which was 15 minutes ago. I still have time. There are no registered speakers for this hearing. The public hearing is now closed. Item number 9 is a public hearing on a resolution to approve supplemental appropriation 25-23 to the FY25 operating budget, Montgomery County Government, Department of Health and Human Services, Behavioral Health Crisis Stabilization Center, and Mobile Crisis Team Pilot, in the amount of $2,906,323, over $2.9 million. Council action is tentatively scheduled for March 18th, 2025. Those wishing to submit material for council's consideration can do so today. There are no registered speakers for this hearing. This public hearing is now closed. Item 10 is a public hearing and action on a resolution to approve the FY24 National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit Financial Assurance Plan. Council action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. There are no registered speakers for this hearing. The public hearing is now closed. We will now move on to the action portion of this item. I am not seeing anyone wishing to comment on this or ask any questions. So I will ask, is there a motion to approve the FY24 National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit Financial Assurance Plan? So moved. Councilmember Katz moved. Councilmember Malcolm second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous of those here and those on Zoom. We still have Councilmember Mink and Lukey hanging in on Zoom. Item 11 is a public hearing and action on a resolution to approve supplemental appropriation 25-49 to the FY25 operating budget, Montgomery County Public Schools Blueprint Career Advising Program, in the amount of over $2.1 million. The source of funds is MCPS's restricted fund balance. Council action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. There are no registered speakers for this hearing. The public hearing is now closed. We will now move to the action portion of this item. Not seeing anyone wishing to speak. Is there a motion to approve supplemental appropriation 25-49? Council Vice President Jawando moved. Councilmember Sales seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is everyone here. Next is item 12, a public hearing and action on resolution to approve supplemental appropriation 25-50 to the FY25 operating budget, Montgomery County Public Schools Blueprint Community Schools Program, in the amount of over $2.2 million. Source of funds is MCPS's restricted fund balance. Council action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. There are no registered speakers for this hearing. The public hearing is now closed. We will now move on to action portion of this item. Not seeing anyone wanting to speak or ask questions. Is there a motion to approve supplemental appropriation 25-50? Council Vice President Jawando moved. Councilmember Balcom second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous here. That is it for our afternoon, early evening session. The council will now be in recess until 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
WPDD 1070 AM on the US 29 corridor and on County Cable Montgomery.
Travel is slow on I-495 in the following locations.
On the end of Interstate 495 from the I-270 spur into Virginia. On the interloop from American Legion Bridge